Good morning. I am Councillor James Shepherd, Chairman of Wiltshire Council. I would like to welcome members and public to this meeting on the 18th of July 2023. Item 1 is apologies. I have received apologies from Councillors Helen Belcher, Brian Dalton, Sarah Gibson, Nick Holder, Simon Jacobs, Bob Jones, Charles McGrath, Dominic McMunns, Dr. Nick Murray, Jack Oatley, Tim Trimble, Derek Waters, Philip Whitehead, Kelvin Nash, Andy Oliver, and Caroline Corbyn. It's good to see the remainder here. Item number 2, minutes of the previous meeting. And we have Ian Thorne. Thank you. Unfortunately, Ian is in hospital, I believe, today, so we send him our very best wishes and hope for a speedy recovery. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of May 2023, as contained from pages 7 to 48 of your summons, be confirmed and signed as a true and correct record.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the minutes being approved by assent of the meeting? None received. Then the minutes are therefore approved. Moving on to declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable interest to declare to the meeting? I remind members that this includes disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable interests as set out in the Code of Conduct. I see none received. Thank you very much. We move on now to Chairman's announcements. On the screen will be the engagements. A list of some recent engagements have been attended by myself and the Vice Chairman since the last meeting, which will be included in the minutes. I will not run through them all. They are there for you to see. And then moving on to the King's Birthday Honours. On your screens is a list of Wiltshire residents honoured in the King's Birthday Honours. I would like to extend congratulations to all those who have been honoured on behalf of the Council. I will read out their names. Dame Professor Melanie Wellham, CB Major General Nicholas Kaplan, OBEs to Chantal Bryan, Robert Fellows and Julian Nolan, MBEs to Claire Besant, Julie Lawrence, Sally Orange, Richard Simmons and David Tarr, and BMs to Leslie Welling, Nigel Lineker. And I'm sure we would all wish to congratulate all those for receiving those honours. It is now my pleasure to welcome Councillor Richard Budden to his first meeting of full council following his success in the Tisbury by-election held on the 18th of June 2023, following the resignation of Councillor Nick Errington. Can I invite Councillor Budden to stand? Thank you very much. Can I just say, I'm not usually at this point allowing people to make any speeches. Is it okay? In that case, please go ahead. Can you press your microphone button? Thank you.
I don't know whether it'll work at this altitude, but I'd like to express my gratitude to my predecessor, Nick Errington, who was forced to stand down on medical grounds and who very generously nominated me and supported my campaign for election. He did a great job for the residents of Tisbury, the Donheads, Fonthill Gifford, and his reputation for integrity and energy helped me secure my famous victory. And I, of course, also ought to thank all my Liberal Democrat colleagues here who campaigned so vigorously on my behalf also, and everyone who voted for me. I intend to represent all of them and all the people of this division, working with councillors of all parties and of none to deliver outcomes that are in the best interests of every part of this county, both now and in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 5, public participation. At this point, I will explain how public participation will work for this meeting. Statements. Members of the public who are registered to make a statement will be called upon to speak under the relevant item for up to 3 minutes each. I remind speakers that any statements must relate to the item of the agenda they are speaking to, and that once their statement is concluded, they may not speak further on the item. If the statement is not in relation to the item, I will intervene. Questions. We have received 14 public questions for this meeting, which were received by the deadline. The question and their responses are included in the agenda supplement. Unless requested otherwise, I will take the questions as read under the relevant agenda items. I would also note constitutional procedures relating to the number of statements which may be received. Accordingly, if a question is chosen to be read out by the questioner, they should restrict this to the question portion of their submission only and not any preamble, as they would only have a maximum of 1 minute to read that question. Can I ask Ian MacDonald, who had a statement on the Wiltshire local plan, if he wishes to speak? Could we get someone to put the microphone on? Is it on? Thank you very much. I now call Celia Beckett. Can we make sure we put the timer on, please?
Thank you. I'm Celia Beckett, Chair of the Hilperton Area Action Group. Thank you for the opportunity to make a statement on behalf of the Hilperton Area Action Group regarding the Trowbridge local plan. We've now had the opportunity to read the local plan review pre-submission and the planning for Trowbridge document, but we are still examining the detail, so we'll be asking a number of further questions of yourselves and your officers. First, we would like to say that we welcome the reduction in overall numbers for housing supply in the Hilperton and Staverton areas. We also welcome the proposed development at Inox Mills on a brownfield site. Our concern lies with the allocation of the development in the Hilperton parish. The site selected for the North Trowbridge local plan is approached from the roundabout on the A361 at the far end of the current Hilperton settlement. It is entirely within the Hilperton parish boundary in open countryside and yet is termed an urban extension of Trowbridge. The 600 houses represent nearly 3/4 of the Trowbridge housing allocation. The development ends in Wadden Lane, next to the Hilperton Village Hall, playing fields and children's nursery, close to the village centre. The local plan professes to protect the conservation area of Hilperton and also to respect, as far as is reasonable practical, the individual identity of the village of Hilperton. Unfortunately, it can do neither. Wadden Lane is an ancient lane that leads to the medieval hamlet of Wadden, the canal and the River Avon. It is lined with trees and ancient hedgerows, and it is an important wildlife corridor for endangered birds and bats. It is currently surrounded on both sides by farmland. Despite this, no buffer zone is indicated in contrast to the east of the site. It is clear to the residents of Hilperton that this extension is not Trowbridge nor urban, and it ignores the village's identity and environment. We understand that Wiltshire Council has to complete a new local plan and that the revision of the housing numbers has resulted in the submission of this partial plan. With a much lower number of houses required, it would have been possible to spread them amongst the different communities in the Trowbridge housing area, rather than continuing to place them largely in Hilperton. The plan in its current format cannot be considered an appropriate plan for this community and therefore would be unsound. We already have the development at Elizabeth Way of 400...
Can I just remind you, you do have 3 minutes and your time has passed. So could you wrap up very quickly?
Sorry?
Could you finish very quickly or 3
Yes,
minutes?
I'm nearly at the end. We have the development at Elizabeth Way of 425 houses, which are also in the parish of Hilperton. So there would in total be over 1,000 new houses in this area, a disproportionate number in what is a special area of conservation. In addition, it will also add to the existing traffic difficulties. The Hilperton Area Action Group recommends that the council reject this plan for Trowbridge on the grounds that it would be detrimental to the setting and environment of Hilperton, and ask that the plan be reconsidered to protect the natural assets and the individual identity of the village of Hilperton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move on to questions. I have a Lucy Castleman who has received a written question. Have you got a supplementary? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I am Lucy Castleman, also from the Hilperton Area Action Group. In a response to an earlier question, you've admitted it's regrettable that the review of the council's local plan and the local transport plan are not able to be carried out in parallel. If I understand correctly, the purpose of the local plan is to provide an appropriate basis for housing, employment, land and infrastructure provision. Given the number of traffic census counters that have appeared in Trowbridge, Bradford and Avon, Holt, Hilperton and Staverton areas, you're expecting capacity and delay issues as a result of the temporary closure of the B3105. Of critical importance in plan making and site identification is the need to ensure that any new development accommodates travel demand generated from planned development sites without negatively impacting on residents, including existing residents. If your outcome is to maintain the transport network performance, i.e. no worsening, then how is this scheme that you are proposing in the local plan for North East Trowbridge going to be successful
Thank you.
when the
Your
hotspot at
time-
Staverton Junction,
Your 1 minute is up. Sorry.
evidenced by your own modelling of capacity and
Can I ask
delay,
you to stop
is
speaking,
forecast
please?
to remain an
Can I ask you
issue?
to stop speaking? I will be very firm. We have a very long meeting. You have been given 1 minute to ask a question. I would ask you to do so in that time. Councillor Nick Bottrell.
Well, I think I concur with the view that it is unfortunate, I think you used the word regrettable, that the transport and local plans cannot be done in tandem. However, it's an issue of practicability, I'm afraid. So whatever we wish in this situation, we can't actually make that happen. But I would like to reassure her that all due consideration will be given to the impacts from transport, and have been in making these assessments. There is no perfect solution. There is never, something which will deliver the required housing without having some consequent impacts. But it's the consideration of those impacts and how material they are, which obviously will be taken into account and has been in coming up with the site selections.
Thank you very much. I next have Celia Beckett, who is also looking for a question. Thank you very much. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for your reply to our question, acknowledging that the field 677A that runs from Wadden Lane to the back of Devizes Road was not included in the original site selection. The field is next to the village hall, playing fields, allotments and community orchard, abundant with wildlife. The building of more than 80 extra houses and a primary school in this field will impact on this area with light pollution, loss of farmland and damage to wildlife. If this plan is agreed, please can you provide a substantial buffer to the hedgerows along Wadden Lane to comply with the Trowbridge bat mitigation strategy and reduce the impact of this development on biodiversity and on Hilperton's rural setting? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Councillor Nick Bottrell.
Thank you again for your question, Ms. Beckett. I can confirm that full due consideration will be given to the impact on the Trowbridge bat mitigation requirements. And of course, one of the aspects of this local plan is a substantial increase in biodiversity net gain over and above what the government is proposing. So please be reassured that such matters are going to be taken fully into account.
Thank you. I next ask Richard Walker, who has had a written answer. Would he also like to have a supplementary question? Richard Walker? Sorry? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to Colin Gale. Is Colin Gale here? Would you like to have another supplementary? Thank you. You have 1 minute.
My supplemental question. My questions were on Policy 70, Sustainable Transport, and Para 4.5, Movement of Goods. Thank you for the response, which acknowledges that ideally the local transport plan should be in front of the local plan. And at the moment, Wiltshire Council does not have a freight management strategy. I believe the local plan, as written, is misleading, as it leads the reader to believe that the local plan is supported by a freight management strategy, with statements like further details on how the measures outlined above should be utilised are outlined in the Wiltshire LTP, etc. I believe it is fundamentally wrong to mislead the public, and that the section should be amended to reflect the true status, and not for the public to refer to the public to a freight management strategy that is currently not in place.
Mr. Gale, I believe you have another question. Do you want a supplementary to that one?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bottrell.
Well, I think, thank you for your question, but I think we'll just have to disagree on that, because, this is a matter of scope and scale, and I don't think the wording is misleading in its nature.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bottrell. We move on to item 6, petitions. I confirm 1 petition has been received since the last meeting, Council. The detail is included within the report at page 51 of the summons. No petitions have been received for presentation to this meeting. I therefore move we note the update on petitions.
I'll second that, Chair.
All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We now move on to the annual report of the Corporate Parenting Panel, July 22nd to March 23rd, and I call upon Councillor Laura Mays as Cabinet Member with responsibility for children, education and skills to introduce this item. The report is at pages 53 to 118 of your summons. Councillor Mays.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to everyone here, and thank you to all of you who written a note to me to say you'd watch the podcast, listen to the podcast from our young people, and isn't it great to hear from them? I'm going to do a very quick update, as I said, because we had a very full and comprehensive review at our meeting in February. But this is the annual update from the Cooperating Parenting Panel, and it gives us all a chance to remember our responsibility as our roles as corporate parents for our children who are in care. The report covers the panel's programme, the scrutiny of our performance, our strategy and our data. And this report has been reviewed by the Scrutiny Panel Task Group and the Corporate Parenting Panel itself. As you know, I'm always very passionate about ensuring that we hear the voice of young people because they really help us shape the service. We currently have 461 children in care, and that includes 85 who are unaccompanied asylum seekers who came through the National Transfer Scheme. We also, very importantly, still have responsibility for 327 care experienced young people with whom we carry on supporting them until we are confident that they are settled in their new lives. Numbers from 2014 grew for our children in care, but since 2021, our numbers have dropped. And this is very much due to the work that we do in early intervention to work with families to keep as many children as possible with their families where that is possible. Pages 56 to 57 outlines all the reports that we've reviewed in the last year. And we continue to champion our 8 strategic priorities, but we are working on new priorities, and that strategy will be updated to be brought to full council in October 23. Generally, our placement stability is good, and our new contract to provide children's homes will provide 2 new beds, which will be for our more complex children. So the picture is good, but we continue to have a real issue with recruiting enough foster carers. And this is where, again, I make my plea every time I stand up here to say, if we can be more like Councillor Mary Champion and do what we can to be foster carers, then that is a good thing. There are a group of over 50 of us from within the council who are running or cycling or walking 25,000 kilometres. We started in April and we are carrying on till October, where we are wearing our Foster for Wiltshire t-shirts and going out and spreading the word that we need more foster carers. And in fact, I was wearing my t-shirt having been for a run and going for a shop and managed to speak to 2 or 3 people in the supermarket, the lady at the checkout who was saying she'd never thought about fostering because she thought she would be too old. So even in that short conversation, I was able to dispel a couple of myths there. So once again, I say, please, anything you do, all the bits of social media that we share online, please share those onto your Facebook pages. Speak to your communities about the sort of people who you know would be good foster carers, because that's what we need to give loving families to our young people. Our GCS attainment for Key Stage 4 shows a strong performance, and our Progress 8 data was very strong. We celebrated our children in care at our Star Awards and the fabulous Children's Christmas Party, which is always a highlight for me. The thing I'm really proud of is our Children in Care Council, and I want to make a special thanks to Joe Sutton and Cameron Drazy, who run that so well. I was always concerned that we always had a very small number of young people involved who I've never felt were representative of the wider population of children in care. They have absolutely embraced that whole system, and we have so many more young people involved who are doing a range of activities. And again, that report is in the paper that you've got before you. So really, I just want to say a big thank you to our fabulous foster caring team and everyone in Children's Services who work with our young people, and to commend this report to full council.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sutton, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. We'll now move on to group leaders. Councillor Cluett.
Thank you, Chair. Really very little to add. I think Laura's covered it all. It's excellent work. It's all moving in the right direction. It's something that we clearly pay careful attention to, and it's great to hear.
Standing in for Councillor Thorne, Councillor Gordon King.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We were very pleased to read what was a very positive report, which owned up to one or two little glitches along the way, but nevertheless left us in supreme confidence that neither would the complacency be allowed to settle, and that we will always move forward in respect of the children in our care. We also had confidence that that we are doing well with it against our comparators, and that said that young children should have all of the means and the skills available to them to meet the challenges of their future. We heartily support the report, and I would also like to express my gratitude both to the cabinet member and to the members of the corporate parenting panel for their work throughout the year and for what is really quite an excellent report.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Ernie Clark. Thank you. Councillor Ricky Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I add my sincere thanks to all of our staff within the teams that deliver this service to our young people, and to the many, many foster carers who give up their homes, welcome young people in, and support them during a time of real need. Thank you, to all of them.
Thank you very much. I'll now open the item to debate. Any member wishing to speak, please press the button on your microphone console to be added to the queue of speakers. I don't see anybody wishing to speak on here. There we go. No, we haven't. Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Please speak to this.
Just to confirm that this item did come through scrutiny. It went through initially our standing task group and then to the main committee. In the standing task group, it had quite a thorough and robust scrutiny, and I thank the corporate parenting panel and officers for taking on board the feedback from scrutiny and making adjustments to the report. And then just two additional things. The first one is we were also pleased, and I think this directly impacts on this report, we were also pleased at Select Committee last week to receive the report from Oxford Brookes University, which gave very, very strong feedback on the quality of service to looked after children and indeed children generally within our children's services team. And I think we should take that alongside the annual report as a real confidence boost that our young people in care are receiving the very best that we're able to do. And it almost pains me to be so nice to the administration at times, but it was a superb report from Oxford Brookes that made clear that in their opinion, we were an outstanding authority, and I use the word deliberately, in the delivery of services. And then very lastly, as I always do every year, but to echo the words that Ricky just used, which is to thank not only our own staff team, but actually all those foster carers out there who do give so much and do so much to support our young people. However good our team are, they would be nothing without those foster carers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hubbard. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to this item, so does Councillor Mays have any comments before we move to the vote? No, in which case, all those in favour say aye. All those against say no. All those abstaining, please indicate. In that case, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, Treasury Management Outturn Report 2022 to 2023. I call upon Councillor Nick Bottrell as Cabinet Member with responsibility for finance to introduce this item. The report is at pages 119 to 142 of your summons, I now ask councillor Bottle to present and move recommendation and a cabinet member to second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think I previously described this report at the Financial Planning Task Group as the equivalent of the full-time match report, coming as it does after 3 Treasury management reports which are produced during the year. That's not quite the case, though, because Treasury management operations are not a single match by a single team. They're a constant activity over the whole year, an activity which requires a lot of aspects and is effectively at the heart of everything that we do as a council. So Treasury management is the boiler room of Wiltshire Council. I also said at Cabinet, when this report was considered first, but I think it's so true that I'm going to say it again, each and every disaster with a local authority's finances starts with something big going wrong in the Treasury department side. Usually, it's something to do with too few questions being asked, too little interrogation, too few views being put forward, which remain unchallenged. So I'm quite relieved to see that, I hope you're relieved as well, to see that a very different approach is being followed by this council. And it's one of challenge and interrogation. Another factor that I'd like to touch on is that now that interest rates are at levels that are more, the levels that they're currently at, I'm sure that's not gone unnoticed by people here, members, a more active approach has to be taken to placing deposits and managing loans. And this is something that is being done. Of course, we can't crystal ball gaze, and we can't forecast with accuracy the precise trajectory of interest rates, but we have known for some time that they were going to go up from what were historic lows, and that at some stage, over the coming 12 months, they were going to stabilize. That's not to involve in speculating on interest rates. That is not what Treasury management in this authority is about. That would be an imprudent course. But it is to do with recognizing that there are trends, that the era of cheap money is now well and truly over, and it's not likely to be returning anytime soon. It's a truism again, but a measure of a sound organization is a sound balance sheet. And we have a sound balance sheet. We've got improved reserves, we have sufficient liquidity, and as a consequence, we have underborrowing, which is highlighted in this report. This all assists the council on the revenue side to a material amount, and you will see that 4.5 million is highlighted as the interest saving, the net interest saving alone against the budget last year. So to wrap up, I think as councillors we should take some pride in the situation of the overall finances here in Wiltshire. Well, I'm told there are 7 councils in the last few weeks that have lodged Section 114 notices, which is the sort of municipal equivalent of putting up a warning of insolvency. And I'm sure there'll be absolutely more to come. We're not in that situation, but we must remain vigilant. We must ensure that our budgets are adhered to, that spending is controlled, and more vitally, that questions keep being asked and viewpoints keep being challenged. Because that, in the long run, is what determines whether or not we retain sound finances. I have great pleasure in putting this report to full council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from group leaders before opening debate to other members. Councillor Richard Clue.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Nick. I think the broad points there have been raised. I think a couple are worth reiterating. I think the clarity of our reporting is really important to note. If you ever have a spare minute and want to have a look at some other councils, the way they report Treasury management, you'll find that we are a paragon of clarity compared to a degree of obfuscation or almost total lack of information in some cases. And I think it's quite interesting to note that some of the councils that don't provide that information are those that are now teetering towards very difficult precipices, somewhere that we are not heading. And I think that shows the grown-up approach that we've got to the handling of finance in this council. That's not just from a perspective of cabinet, that's much more from the perspective of our officers, the work that Andy, Lizzie and their teams do. But it's also the work of scrutiny and making sure that we present to scrutiny, to the Financial Planning Task Group, to the wider world, a clear picture of what our finances are like, the picture they're in, what we're doing and why. It's open to challenge, it gets scrutiny, it makes sure that it makes sense. Unlike, I don't know, Woking or Slough, where things were going on in a way that, if you read the reports, wasn't particularly transparent, and my goodness, there are some problems coming out now. As Nick points out, the world of local government finances is replete with councils in deep trouble. Southampton, closest to home, went from 2 months ago, everything's being fine, to, in effect, a 114 notice. They're calling it a pre-114 discussion with government. I'm not sure what that means. I think it means they've got to save more money than they can possibly find. Treasury management seems really dull. It's really important. Inflation has hit us hard, but through sound Treasury management, we've been able to recoup some of that through sensible investment and making sure that we are investing appropriately. It also gives us a good grasp on where we sit with borrowing. And borrowing is what is breaking councils. Guildford, the cost of refinancing, is what's forced them to effectively issue a 114 notice. A lot of other councils are following. By controlling our borrowing, by understanding our Treasury management, we keep the fundamental core of this council on a sound footing, and that enables us to do everything else that we have to do, that we want to do for our residents. So it might be dull, but it's absolutely critical. I think it's an excellent report. I'm very happy, content with the position we're in, and thank everyone for all the work that's gone into it.
Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Chair. With your forbearance, I'm going to pass over to Councillor Gavin Grant to give my group response.
I do indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Gordon. And thank you to Nick for his forbearance in the regular scrutiny that takes place on Treasury management. And I echo Richard's comment that this can be seen as a rather dry subject matter, but it is the area in which local authorities have got themselves into difficulties in the past, and we are not in that place here. And I pay great tribute to Mr. Andy Brown and Lizzie Watkin and the whole finance team. They've done an outstanding job since their arrival here with us at Wiltshire Council. I think many councillors in this room were concerned, and in our previous council, at the number of interim senior finance officers that we'd had and the difficulties that might create for us. The arrival of this team, I think, is quite exceptional, Chairman. And I also pay tribute also candidly, to Nick and to Pauline as his predecessor, with the degree to which they have opened up to scrutiny in this area. And I echo the comment about the clarity of the reporting here. So I thoroughly endorse this report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark. Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to note the contents of the report, and I'm happy to say congratulations. Not hard sometimes. You've managed a difficult financial situation worldwide, countrywide. What I do hope is that we see a reduction in contract inflation, which has cost this council £28 million. £28 million. I hope when we come to the budget setting next February, we see a reduction in that figure.
Thank you. I'll now open the item to debate. Any member wishing to speak, please press the button on your microphone console to be added to the queue of speakers. Councillor Piazza.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the public.
Can I just ask all councillors to stand when making statements?
Apologies, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the Public Works Loan Board, Chair. Does the council have a general strategy when the interest rate for local at the department increases?
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
Well, Chairman, I was quite surprised by Gavin Grant's comments that he thinks this is a rather dry subject matter. I think it's rather interesting, actually, and perhaps that says something more about me than it does anybody else. I don't think this is particularly a cause for success. Obviously, I have every confidence in our officers and I accept the contents of the report, but it's the numbers that matter. It's actually getting behind the figures. And the reality is that the budget that we all voted for, or those of us that chose to vote for it last year, has largely not been achieved. And I think, actually, this council should be subject to quite some criticism. If you look at the housing revenue accounts, the figures of the underspend in investment are absolutely massive. We could have invested 30 million additional pounds that was budgeted for this financial year that's just gone, that's illustrated in this report. Think of the effect that that could have on our communities with additional housing, carbon reduction, infrastructure locally. I certainly know that my residents would have welcomed that investment in that social housing. Look at the general fund. The figures there are absolutely eye-watering. £153 million of investment that was budgeted for that didn't take place. Think of the investment in roads that we could have had. And the thing about our road network is that actually we have on our secondary routes, as the Transport Asset Management Plan shows, a policy of managed decline. Our roads are getting worse on our secondary routes. This money could have been used to arrest that decline. My residents complain to me about the infrastructure in Wiltshire all the time. It's the biggest single thing that people talk to me about is the condition of our roads, our footpaths, our highways. And why is this? It's because our capital programme is slipping, because our project management at this council isn't all that it might be. And if you look around, investment in our schools, some of our schools have had issues with, in my ward, issues with the roofs. Leisure facilities, the leisure facilities in Westbury are very, very tired. The swimming pool is antiquated. The sports centre hasn't had any investment of any significance for decades. And this money could have been used to make improvements in my division and across the whole council. So no, this is not good news. This is not a job well done. This is very poor indeed. And the council is fascinating, isn't it? Not one member of the cabinet seems to want to talk about how in their own individual portfolios, the capital programme is slipping. And you look around the county, at some of the more important pieces of infrastructure. I'm thinking now perhaps of the City Hall in Salisbury, closed, shut. You know, time is marching on. That building's been closed for years now. And one of the reasons it's been closed is because the council still hasn't got a strategy to bring that building back into use, and that is reflected in this report. And for that example, you could look at the libraries in your divisions, some of which need investment. You could look at other leisure facilities across the council. You could even look, actually, at some of our office buildings. So I say this is not a cause for congratulation. This is not a cause for success. Actually, this is quite worrying.
Thank you, councillor. I don't have anybody else queuing to speak. In which case, I do now. I do have a councillor Laura Mays.
I really want to raise the issue of investment in schools. We are investing in special schools in a way that we have never done before. We've created 155 new resource-based places within primary schools, another 40 in our secondary schools. We've invested 38.5 million in our Silverwood Centre of Excellence. These are the sort of projects that we're doing day in, day out. If you read reports and see what's actually going on, you will see how much activity there is in my area and in every area that we're responsible for. So I would rather you didn't use those sort of comments, particularly when it comes to children's services.
Thank you. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to come in back on what Councillor Dean was saying about the HRA underinvestment. There is significant investment taking place. There has been an element of slippage. That isn't for any reason other than the fact that programs take time, and therefore the reporting of the costs take time as well. But all of that is built into the program. All of it is taking place. We are delivering homes. We are retrofitting homes. We are doing a significant amount of work. And I think to sort of just come in and criticise.
Can I please ask the councillors not to shout out? This is not the forum for such behaviour. Thank you.
But to come in with a sweeping statement without understanding the complexities and the issues underlying it is a little bit clumsy and slightly misleading. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor McLennan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Dean stimulated me. Yeah. I wish I hadn't have said that now. The City Hall in Salisbury has been closed for some time. It was in use as a COVID centre. However, it was being deemed that the vibrations in there are not conducive to sound at the moment and need some work. £2 million says press releases, but we've not seen any report to actually substantiate that amount. What I would also say is that yesterday we received a press release, members release, saying that City Hall has been losing money over every year for some years. Well, I remember when I first became a councillor in 1995 and was on the City Hall committee, and it was run for the best interests of the community, and the community were quite happy with the fact that at the end of the financial year there was a deficit of £300,000. So nowadays it's nothing like that through whatever means. So this isn't a bad thing to run a public venue at a deficit. All the public venues will no doubt be running at a deficit. I don't know what the one at Trowbridge is. I've asked for those figures, haven't got them yet, but it'll be running at a deficit. I used to be an entertainment promoter, and any council venue I used to promote in across the country would be very, very welcoming to promoters, but they were, and the prices were fair so that the promoter could come out of it with some sort of semblance of a profit. Not much, I would add, being one of those poor promoters. But the council view was that this is bringing in revenue to the centre, but also revenue to the community. And I remember reading Wiltshire Council documents saying that for every £1 we spent on the arts, it was bringing in £7. So because people visiting places like Salisbury City Hall would be adding into the local community. Another document of Wiltshire Council said it was £20. So somewhere in between there probably is the right answer. But we mustn't look upon these deficits as being a reason to close venues and to make the staff redundant, which is and strip out the ingredients of City Hall, which is what's happened at the moment. And that's why the bill is £2 million probably, as well as the sound. What we must do is look at investing the money we have got properly on capital expenditure, restoring buildings such as City Hall, and bringing them into action to bring in that extra money for the community that it generates. So between £7 and £20 for every visitor, is something we should all be looking to as a positive, not the fact that each year there's a deficit of a few thousand, as there will be for every entertainment venue in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not too sure quite. I think we may have wandered off the actual topic slightly on that one. Councillor Blair Pilling.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Dean, under the item that we're talking about, revenue, cast a fairly wide net of accusations about capital projects in all of this. And I just want to give a degree of reassurance of those projects in my own area in this. And I'll just run down a little list, if I may, which seem to somehow come into Councillor Dean's list of things that we apparently haven't been doing anything. He talked about leisure. I'd point out that after a good deal, a number of years of difficulties of bringing Melksham to fruition, we brought it to fruition. We are bang on schedule with bringing forward a whole new leisure centre for Trowbridge. So I don't think that's a small achievement in terms of managing capital projects. Later this month, I shall be looking at 3 different business cases for further investment in 3 different leisure centres. Again, we're pushing forward on making that investment. On City Hall in Salisbury, I think there's an awful lot of kind of rumour mongering or whatever it is that's going on around this. The simple facts around City Hall, and I will bring the library into this, are that we have an inspection report that says we cannot open it. We can't open it against that legal and insurance advice. You know, which council wants to stick up their hand and say, go ahead and open it, against all the advice of insurance, etc. I don't think any of us would be that naive in our judgment. Now, in terms of what are we trying to do, well, it makes sense to not just treat every separate venue and say, well, what's the repair bill? Let's just sort it out and let's just move on. When you're faced with a £2 million repair bill on City Hall and a repair bill on the library, that is of the order of £1 million, simply to reinstitute them to the state they were in a year, 2 years ago or so, it makes sense to look at some options. One of those options will be to repair them, to bring them back into service in their previous form. But it would be complete nonsense to not properly look at it. Are we spending that money sensibly? Have we got other options in which we could produce something better for Salisbury in all of those? So I'm not going to go into speculating what those options are. The officers are working hard on them and we'll be seeing them shortly. To just finally answer the point about whether every building should pay for itself and whether we should consider it investment. Yes, of course, if you look across the whole leisure estate, it doesn't, if you include all the building costs, it doesn't generate enough revenue to pay all those building costs. But we have to press on to make them as financially sustainable as possible and make sure that it works within our revenue accounting in that. And that includes driving up the membership, driving up the attendance, getting in, driving up the income, driving down the costs, making sure all of those buildings are fit for purpose. So I'm sorry, I do bristle when Councillor Dean chooses to attack our overall budget outturn, saying we're not doing something on capital projects. We most certainly are. And to use another councillor's phraseology, are we walking the walk? We most certainly are.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Sample.
Chairman, thank you for that. Very interesting debate has become apparent on the issue of the City Hall, which is close to my heart because it's in my ward. And I feel that I should convey to you strong feeling from the people of Salisbury, whom I represent and who others represent, that this City Hall is not Wiltshire Council City Hall, It belongs to the people of Salisbury because it is a war memorial. It was built because people younger than me went around in their schools and collected money, pennies, half pennies, threepenny bits, and saved up the money to buy it in commemoration of the dead of the Second World War. And it has been a very successful entertainment venue as well. And when I say successful, successful in the sense that hundreds of thousands of people have been there for gigs, comedians, musicians, local organisations having their annual get-together, Wiltshire, WI, their annual meeting, which I tell you is terrifying. They've lots of elections.
Can I just interject slightly?
Lots
I
and
know we
lots-
like to sow a scene, but we are
lots
talking
and
about
lots.
Treasury management. Thank you.
Lots and that this building belongs to them, the people of Salisbury, and they feel completely shut out of what's being discussed at the moment by people like Councillor Ian Blair-Pilling, who apparently turned up with a group of other cabinet members and wandered around the City Hall deciding what should be done. They should be asking themselves, what do the people of Salisbury want done with the City Hall?
Councillor Sandford.
Where are they in the consultation process? Nowhere. They haven't been asked. Yet apparently there is a
Councillor
report that
Sandford,
says
can I
that
ask
it is
you to come back to
unfit. Now, we haven't seen that report. We want to see the letter, Chairman.
I will.
We want to see the letter from the specialist.
Your microphone. Please can you come back to the topic? Can you please come back to the subject we're discussing, which is the Treasury Management Outturn Report?
With the comments which have been my colleague here, Mr. Dean, he's identified quite correctly that there's a £30 million missing hole that could have been used for capital project. We want that money, some of that money, returned to City Hall and get it up and running again. And we don't want it sometime in the distant future, sometime when it's been decided by the Cabinet. We want it to be involving the local residents. We want the communities and the organisations to be consulted. We want them to be asked, and the councillors here present from Salisbury want to have access to the building to see for themselves whether it is as bad as it's made out. And we don't believe it is.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, can you please stick to the topic we are discussing? It's going to be a very long afternoon. I do not wish to get to the point where I switch people's microphone on, but I will do so. Can I please now call Councillor Ridout? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You just made a remark which I was going to endorse. We seem to have gone completely off the track on this subject. Treasury management is about prudent borrowing, saving money on interest when the markets are very unstable. And I would like to endorse, as my Vice Chair said, Councillor Grant, that this has been highly looked at. It's a fallacy that just because we haven't spent the capital that we can spend it everywhere else, because we haven't got it. We haven't borrowed it. And that's the whole basic of a Treasury management strategy, that you borrow only what you need when you need it, and especially not this last year when the interest rates have been horrendous. So I would endorse everything that the Cabinet member and Councillor Grant has said, and the praise for our excellent finance team, who do nothing except bring all the policies to financial planning and scrutiny. and I would endorse everything that's been said in favour of that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Giles. Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll do my best to stay on topic. But I think part of effective financial and treasury management is the concept of prudence. I think prudence extends to not just what we put in our budgets, but what we communicate to the public. I did just want to make a couple of comments on City Hall, and again, I will keep them relevant to the topic. But speaking in my capacity as portfolio holder for arts, heritage, and tourism, I actually will agree with Councillor Sample that City Hall holds a special place in a lot of our hearts. You know, I grew up in Salisbury. I've been to events there. I got my COVID vaccination there. I think I even sat some of my A-level exams there many years ago. But the fact is, we have an independent report which says that that building is not currently safe for us to open. And so to whip up public sentiment around doing something which not only causes a liability for us as a council, but also interferes with our long-term vision for what we're trying to do for the city, to score some cheap political points, just seems to me to be a little bit misguided. I think if you look at what we're doing across Salisbury, we're leveraging capital, both local and central government capital, to fundamentally change the fabric of our city. You look at what we're doing around funding the station forecourt and the works on Fisherton Street.
Can I also remind you to keep to the subject of the Treasury Management Outturn report? I know Salisbury is very important, but we are actually a Wiltshire council. Thank you.
Understood, but future High Streets money does come through Wiltshire Council. I think you look at what we're doing around the River Park and everything else. It's a very, very good example of effectively leveraging local and national money to deliver a long-term vision and a long-term strategy for a very important city that's been through a lot. And I just don't like this idea of us diminishing something like that into an argument to score some cheap points on a subject that it's not really relevant to. So I just wanted to correct the record that building, we've had independent advice that it's not safe to open right now. And to do that, I think, would give us a liability. Instead, let's focus on the long-term vision. Let's focus on making the most of the capital we have available to us to do something transformational, instead of a protracted back and forth about something it's not prudent for us to be doing anyway. And I'll just leave my comments there.
Thank you very much. I do not have any other speakers wishing to speak, in which case, can I hand back to Councillor Botterill and ask if he has any comments before we move to the vote?
Thank you, Chairman. I do have some comments. And I'll first of all address Councillor Piazza's question. I think if you look at paragraph 26, that is quite explanatory. And it shows the PWLB borrowing, which has an average lifespan of nearly 18 years and an average rate of 3.3%, considerably lower than what you could borrow at the moment. And part of that was the £80 million which was taken out only last year at 2% from the PWLB. So, of course, one tries to borrow from that source as one would borrow from any other source at the lowest rates possible. But I think the evidence stacks up to show that, we are in a good place on that, and in particular with the 80 million at 2%, a level which now we can get more on deposit for. So that's good treasury management. It's not speculating on interest rates, as I said earlier, but it's good treasury management. And that, of course, is what this report is about, Councillor Dean. I'm really sorry to have to point it out, but there is a difference. I think you're confusing the Treasury Management Outturn report with the capital expenditure outturn for last year. So you're mixing up the handling of cash with the capital investment, indicative capital investment programs. So I do hope you're not in business by any way, because, you might not have a very long future if you get those sorts of things mixed up. Actually, just touching on the matter of capital expenditure, local authorities have always over-programmed their capital for the year ahead, because you have a long list of things that you want to do. Some of them are ifs, maybes, possible, like to haves, or whatever. So we had the Maltings development in our capital programme for a long time. But it's not correct. And if you'd have been to any of the various meetings, and I'm sorry if you were and I can't recall you being there, but I certainly don't seem to remember you being there or asking questions. You'd have known that cabinet members and other members ask lots of questions about the capital over-programming. This is a major feature for our finance department to resolve and to get to a better place. And some substantial work has been done. There's still more to do. But it is simply untrue to say that we just sort of blithely don't bother how much capital is put forward every year and whether it's spent or whether it's not spent. This is something which is now getting rapier-like focus, and we will be in a much better place in the future. So, sorry to have to take yet another speech to put these matters right, but I think they deserve to be said. You need to make sure that you read the report, Treasury Management Outturn. That's what it's about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bottrell. In accordance with the Constitution, there will be a recorded vote on this item. Please indicate on your microphone console whether you are voting for the motion, against the motion, or if you are abstaining from the motion. I will allow 20 seconds for members to vote. Tick is the yes, minus is the no, and the cross is to abstain. Sorry, plus.
Green plus.
Green plus is yes, the minus is no, and the cross is the abstain. For 77, against no, abstains 3, in which case it is carried. And we move forward to item 9, the capital programmes additions. I call upon Councillor Nick Bottrell, a cabinet member with responsibility for finance, to introduce this item. The report is at pages 143 to 148 of your summons. Councillor Bottrell to present, and please move your recommendation. Then I'll ask a cabinet member to second.
Formally moved, and yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll try and be brief. So the housing acquisition report and the capital outturn report both made to cabinet, made some recommendations which are now combined in this report. £10 million had already been agreed as funding to support new house purchases, and it was always anticipated at the time that this would be geared. What this report is now proposing is that a 3-to-1 gearing is hypothecated, but actually the precise ratio would depend on the business case applying at the time of acquisition. So in case people worry that a 3-to-1 gearing is imprudent or not, or overly prudent, some people might say, actually it will depend on the business case at the time. And of course, the acquisition of this additional housing to deliver long-term solutions to a range of service needs has been for some time an intention of this administration. And we're talking about housing that would be provided for refugees, Ukrainians, Afghans, and other people for which we have a statutory need to house. So I think, this is all about sort of being in the right place in terms of our revenue budgets. We don't have anybody in bed and breakfast at the moment. Consider that or compare that with other councils. We mentioned one earlier on that apparently is going to issue a Section 114 notice, Hastings, precisely because it's got itself into a problem with bed and breakfast. It is incredibly expensive. So this is a way of avoiding those sorts of pitfalls. It's a way of buying some assets and using those assets prudently. And each and every acquisition, as I stressed earlier, will require a business case to be presented. and will need to be viable, taking into account the higher interest rates that now would be paid on any borrowing, and also the service savings that would accrue. So that is the first one. The second one is to transfer £800,000 from the SIL reserve to cover anticipated borrowing in LOFIG. Given the remit of SIL as an infrastructure levy, which comes from all developments all over the county, it would seem unwise to ignore that and just borrow the money for LOFIG. So this is to correct that and to use SIL money in a productive, prudent and sensible way. So those, I think, are, dare I say, after the last report, good news stories. I think they are. I have a little bit of hesitation using good news stories, but I think they are. They are sensible. They're about prudent management, and I formally move them, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bottrell. We will now hear from group leaders before opening debate to other members. Councillor Cliver.
Thank you, Chair. It's good after the last discussion that seemed to drift everywhere but Treasury management to now be touching on capital expenditure. And it might be worth noting that our capital expenditure is nothing like as simplistic as was suggested in the previous comments from some members opposite. For example, our highways expenditure comes from government and is spent in full every year on highways. The capital investment that's going into the HRA will all be spent on the provision of housing in the HRA. COVID caused a bit of a blip in delivery for reasons that I suspect we all understand. I won't dwell further on the capital programme. Nick's made a very valid point about the maltings. We are making sure the profiling of our capital programme is much more accurate moving forward. This is investment that will happen. We've got to make sure we are realistic about when it will happen. But the two items we've got here, I think, are really good news. The SIL funding, we doubled funding for Catchy, LH figures it's now become, to add in footpaths. And that extra funding is coming from SIL, and that makes a great deal of sense. SIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy, is there to deliver on the pressures that on infrastructure that are faced by the delivery of new housing. And whilst in our larger towns and our city, that pressure is different. It creates greater demands in localised areas. We see development across the entire county, and the idea that we use some of the SIL spread across the entire county to help address that infrastructure through very localised projects, I think makes a great deal of sense. I think it's a very good way to be using that money. Onto the housing, and I'll try not to bore for too long here, but I'm sure you all know how much of a passion of mine housing is. This is part of a much bigger programme of housing that I think is really significant. It really shows the way that this council, this administration tackles problems. This is the final part at the moment. That we'll let Andy and his team actually get out there and buy more houses before we go on to the next stages. But this comprises as a whole programme now. You've got the local authority housing programme from central government. Interestingly, a programme they put together based on the work we were doing around how to fund Ukrainian refugees through Stone Circle. We've had 9 million investment there, 4 million coming from grant. We've put an additional 5 million borrowing in. That's providing 30 houses for Ukrainian and Afghan refugees, can only be spent on them, and is providing that long-term housing. We've got the Stone Circle work with Ukrainians, where we've got money coming in through the Ukrainian funding and from, again, additional borrowing. We've got the same thing with the rest of the Stone Circle programme. And now this general fund provision, which is about finding those areas of market failure where we can intervene to make sure that we both house people properly, so they're in temporary accommodation and not in B&Bs. Putting people in B&Bs, particularly children, we know how bad that is for them. We know what the data shows, the damage that does. And making sure that we've got that provision, that we've got provision for care leavers, so we can find houses of multiple occupation to get care leavers into to help them sustain that first tenancy in a secure environment. To look at making sure that where we've got SEND, we've got people transitioning from children to adults with special needs, to make sure that we identify the appropriate housing for them. We avoid in the future sending them off to placements all over the place in the country, and make sure that we are putting them inside Wiltshire, and again, providing them the support that they need. That not only means they get a better outcome, a better provision of housing, but it also saves us money. and both those points need to go hand in hand. So this general fund, it's an additional 125 units. We'll be looking at over 250 units from the combined impact of these programs. And that means that everyone we are housing through this kind of funding does not end up on the housing register, which is under enough strain as it is with the pressures we've faced, so that the housing register works as efficiently as possible for our residents who, for whatever reason, meet housing, the requirements to be on the housing register and are looking for that degree of support. So I think this is extremely welcome. I think it's extremely positive. I absolutely endorse it to you.
Councillor King.
Once again, Chairman, we beg your forbearance and pass over to Councillor.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor King. I echo the comments of Councillor Cluer. We spent a lot of time examining with a degree of financial rigour led by the chair of the Financial Planning Task Force in Councillor Ridout. And I would just urge members, we see the wording of the proposal before us, but if you go to paragraphs 9 and 10 of the report, there I think you see the very important caveats that are placed here. Whilst there is a 3-to-1 leveraging position as set out in paragraph A, what you'll note in paragraph 9 of the report is that this is the subject of individual business case scrutiny, and that is a very important reference. In other words, given the business case, it may well be that leveraging is greater, or it may well be that it is a smaller amount than the 3-to-1 suggested here. And there is therefore a degree of rigour here, and that report will come back through Cabinet and therefore be available for scrutiny for all members here. And I absolutely echo the wider, for us in financial scrutiny, that's our focus. But as responding on behalf of the group, I echo very much the comments that Councillor Cluer has just made as to the valuable social and wider impact that this programme of work has, and have no hesitation in endorsing the proposals themselves. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Just quickly to say, fully endorse this, and I'm pleased to see the £800,000 coming from SEAL towards the LH figs. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to support A and B. Just one comment on A. I'm happy that we're always looking for housing solutions, deliver long-time service solutions. I wish we would do the same with the sites that we own. Brownfield site, engine sheds in Salisbury. We own it. Let's get on and find a solution for it. Otherwise, it'll be another decade of nothing. And then could you just clarify in B that the 400,000 will be divided equally amongst the 18 area boards?
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. I will now open the item to debate. Any member wishing to speak, please press the button on your microphone console to be added to the queue of speakers. We start with Councillor Joe Trigg.
Thank you, Chair. So my question actually refers to the full report that went to Cabinet last week, where it referred to nearly £9 million worth of external grant funding being removed from the West Ashton Urban Extension Project, because the council's having to withdraw from the HIF fund due to a developer missing Section 106 agreement deadline. So I'm seeking clarity on what is proposed to replace the funding, and at what point that will come back into the capital programme, and actually, if it's not replaced, what impact that has on the Ashton Park development of over 2,000 houses, which is then contained in the local plan we'll discuss later.
Thank you, and can I thank you for sticking to the topic? Thank you very much. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to say that I 100% support what Richard has said and Gavin has said. That's Councillor Cluer and Councillor Grant. With the capital programme for purchasing houses, 100% support, increasing the social housing. I am a little concerned that we're going to be buying them from the market, and therefore that might have an implication for people who are buying themselves. We're competing with the public rather than developing and building these properties. Hopefully that will be addressed in the local plan. My big concern is, and Richard alluded to this with it all going through Stone Circle, the purchase of houses for letting is likely to make a loss, but that's worth it for the social benefit that we give to our community because it is such a high priority. But the other element of Stone Circle, which is the purchase of land, development, and then selling on to the council and privately, the maths to me doesn't work. I am concerned that with the present market, with house prices likely to drop anything up to 25%, as a major report produced yesterday, and material costs are going up every time I go for a development. If I don't order the materials this month, next month it's going up. And we're not talking small percentages, we're talking big percentages. So when you have these long-term programs, if you don't get on with them, as we see with HS2, the actual capital cost is substantially more than you predicted. And in this case, with the sale of houses afterwards, you might actually get less than you predicted. We're already predicted in the first 3 projects that Stone Circle have got that we won't make a profit, we might make a loss. And I think the fear is the risk will be bigger, and we don't want to go down the same route as Croydon did, getting into capital projects, making losses, and then doing exactly what we're saying we're not doing, is going to the government to say we can't make our money. So what I would like, I've had reassurance from Andy Brown, and I know Richard is on the case, but could we have reassurance that if we go down the Stone Circle acquisition and building route, we do monitor it vigorously, and we are going to be more cautious and not expedite, as Councillor Dean suggests, spending money because we've got it, only spending money where there is actually a point in making a profit, which is the whole purpose of Stone Circle.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I'd now like to welcome again Councillor Richard Budden.
Thank you. Switch it on. Thank you. First of all, just to build on what Councillor Foster has said and perhaps go a bit further, I want to make a point about Stone Circle. One of 3 developments being pursued by the Stone Circle Development Company lies in my division, and I've been trying without success to get confirmation from the chair of Stone Circle that the project is progressing according to earlier plans that were published and consulted about and approved. Hearsay and Councillor Foster's account had attended the recent shareholder meeting suggest to me that the viability of Stone Circle's development activity is in doubt. If Stone Circle's viability is in doubt, I have a question for the administration. When is it going to draw the obvious conclusion and put the company and blighted communities where their plans are not proceeding out of their misery? And the second point I want to make concerns item B, the allocation of funding for LH Figs. I did put a question forward on this topic, but it didn't get called earlier. The question I have in relation to item B is whether this funding is sufficient. We all know that LH Figs funding was increased a couple of years ago when their predecessors, Cat G's, definition was revised, but that funding was taken from elsewhere in the capital budgets available to area boards at the time. It wasn't new money. And it was taken from spending on other often related aspects of local infrastructure. And the responsibility for that was transferred along with the cash. The fact is that the funding for LH Figs has not increased this year, although funding for road maintenance went up by 8%. LH Figs funding has remained stable. And this has put great pressure on local parish councils, many of whom operate on slender precepts. So the fact that there's been no increase, and according to item B, it doesn't look as if the funding from SIL coming forward will represent any increase either.
leads me to ask whether if safety is a genuine priority for this council, whether you're acknowledging the need to see LHFIG budgets increase to bring them back in line with inflation and to cope with the rising costs, ably demonstrated by Councillor Foster's remarks earlier.
Thank you, Councillor Budden. I now move on to Councillor Dean.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I noted Councillor Bottrell's comments that a lot of work is going on to try and stop over-programming within the budgets so that last year's capital programme underspends aren't repeated. And I'll take that almost as an admission that I was right. I was also shocked at the thought of stimulating Councillor McLennan, and I will therefore swiftly move on to my comments on this matters. The first thing is, I welcome this addition to the housing programme. It seems to me that securitisation and using that money to lever additional funds to deliver the acquisition of housing is a prudential and sensible thing to do. I think my criticism would be what's not in this. And the interesting thing is that councillors stand up and welcome the proposals from the administration. The thing I would say to colleagues in opposition is you should be considering what capital programmes additions you think are political priorities so that you put your ideas forward rather than be completely reactive to what the administration is doing. The administration is the administration. They have a large working majority and they can spend money within reason on whatever they wish. But it's your job in opposition to come up with alternative proposals. And surely when it comes to the capital programme, you've got loads of things that you would want to spend money on. So you need to suggest them. I also think that this is a good moment just to reflect on, just because the fact that in some cases, massive unitary authorities like Birmingham and Croydon are facing bankruptcy effectively, that doesn't mean that we should all be congratulating ourselves that we are not in that position. They have chronically badly managed their budgets in some of these authorities. I was talking to a friend of mine who pointed out to me that Surrey County Council is spending £500,000 on dilapidations, finance and business rates, owning the empty Debenhams building in Winchester. You know, these are extraordinarily poor investments that councillors put their hands up and supported across the whole country. And similarly, I do agree with Councillor Clure that bed and breakfast accommodation for anybody that faces a housing need is an absolute worst case scenario. So I think he's right in that. And the administration needs to be commended at least for making sure that we don't have any significant numbers of people in that situation. Now, the other thing is I certainly think that these sort of blips in delivery, as Councillor Clure described them, are actually well worth further consideration. I mean, if the Maltings project, as a case in point, a massive capital project, is not viable and will not be brought forward for some years, the capital programmes need to reflect that. And I mean, I don't accept the point that Councillor Phil Alford was making, that just because he had a £30 million underspend, he's doing his best, and therefore everything is okay. It's not okay. And it's the same in schools, actually. You know, there are schools that are desperate for capital money, and that capital money has not been budgeted for, and yet on the capital programme, the things that were budgeted for, some things have not been delivered. There was an opportunity cost there. And in Councillor Blair Filling's area, the underspend is over 20 million, Councillor Filling. So don't turn around and say it's all going brilliantly, because it's not. Yes, you've delivered some projects. Yes, you've got others in train. But the fact is, against your budget, from your administration, that you put directly your input into your service
Councillor Dean, can I remind you
area.
have 30 seconds left?
Thank you. In your service area, you have got massive underspends. So I would say that the capital programme needs to be looked at on that basis.
Thank you very much. Councillor Viger.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to seek clarification on something that Councillor Cluer said. It's not technically within what's on the screen, but this capital programme addition for housing was the subject of a press release at the end of last week, which mentioned the 10 million that is being approved here, being leveraged up to 40 million, but also mentioned, as Councillor Cluer said, money from the local authority housing fund that has been spent on, I think, 30 houses for Ukrainians and Afghans, which I would completely welcome. Absolutely the right way to spend that money. That's where the money is, what the money is earmarked for. But then said that the total bits being spent on housing for refugees and others in need would be 50 million. Well, if there's 40 there and there's 4 from the local authority housing fund, that leaves 6. So am I assuming that 6 million is what you referred to in the press release as the, I think the words were the balance of the Ukraine, Homes for Ukraine money? If not, what do you mean by the balance of the Homes for Ukraine money? Because my understanding is that there are a lot of things the council has to spend money on day by day to support Ukrainian refugees, the teaching of English as a foreign language, checks, safety checks, DBS checks, etc. So I'm just seeking to get some clarification on how much of that Ukrainian tariff money, as it's called, the council's received, and how much of it you're actually planning to spend on housing through Stone Circle, and whether there'll be enough left for the day-to-day support of Ukrainian refugees, especially given the way that the conflict is sadly going at the moment, that we may even see some more coming our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Viger. I now call Councillor Hubbard.
Thank you, Chair. Homelessness is a blight in our first world society, and it's right that we do all that we can to address and mitigate the issue. Therefore, I fully support the proposal to invest heavily in additional social housing for our residents. The risk, though, as highlighted earlier in the debate, is that we are removing homes, I beg your pardon, is that we are removing homes, particularly lower priced homes, from the marketplace, which could potentially even drive up prices. Could we not use this funding to support enforced purchases from other public bodies of unused properties? There are, for instance, as Councillor Alford, I'm sure, is waiting for me to about to say, 4 unused nurses' homes on the Melksham Hospital site in my division in Melksham that have lain empty for some 12 years, every year getting more and more dilapidated. Surely this council could make use of the powers that it does have to compulsorily purchase abandoned properties and bring them back into use, thus not impacting so heavily the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. I now like to invite Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond to the point made by Councillor Budden on LHFIG. I was struggling to hear you properly. Obviously, with the height of you, the microphone doesn't pick up your voice very well, but I think you said that your question on LHFIG hadn't been called. That's actually later on the agenda, so you'll have an opportunity to ask that towards the end of the meeting. The LHFIG budgets were increased by 100% last April, precisely because this administration did recognise the importance of LHFIGs and the roles that they could play and local decision-making for small-scale highway improvements. Yes, parish councils, or city, town and parish councils are asked to contribute to those schemes where they request and support them, but the contribution levels are determined by each individual LHFIG in line with the principles of local decision-making. LHFIG is, of course, for discretionary schemes, so that has nothing to do with our statutory highway duty or the safety schemes that would have to be implemented. And nobody is suggesting that we're pushing those onto the city, town, or parish councils. Those major maintenance schemes are completely separate budgets. This item specifically is not to do with changing the amount of funding allocated to LHFIGs. This is purely about where the funding is coming from, saying that we can fund some of that budget for LHFIGs from SIL rather than borrowing. So that's not changing the formulas in any way.
Thank you very much. I don't have anyone else wishing to speak, so I'll now hand back to Councillor Bottrell to ask if he has any comments before we move to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, just looking down at some of those questions, I think there was a question about LHFIG being spread evenly to all area areas. Well, all area boards are not equal in the sense they vary enormously in size. So I'm sure it's done by a formula. I don't actually know what that formula is, but I'm sure we could supply you with that formula. To the point that LHFIG spending has not risen, and bearing in mind this is not about spending new money, this is about simply accounting for the money that's in the budgets already. But bear in mind LHFIG spending, budget did double on April 2022. So one should take into account, I understand there's been inflation, but it did double. At the beginning of the financial year in 22. What else? Ashton Park. Well, this is a matter of the HIF and the trials and tribulations over the HIF. The developer says that they can now proceed without the HIF money. And the reason that HIF money was not forthcoming was because there was a cut-off date applied by Homes England, which for one reason or another, mainly down to the developer, it was not possible for that money to be accessed. That's not down to Wiltshire Council, that's down to factors outside of our control. Oh yes, sorry, on the LHFIG as well, the substantive funding pot, I should stress, also went up by 100,000 in April 22. So it would be unfair to say that LHFIG has not had significantly increased resources over the past 2 years. Right, Councillor Hubbard, unused properties. I have to say that example of unused properties sounds not terribly attractive if I were looking at making an acquisition, and I suspect we have to be very careful what we spend our money on, the public's money on. And indeed, as Councillor Foster said, you know, one should be prudent and careful about all these things. I suspect there's a long story behind the unoccupied nurses' homes on the hospital side. It doesn't sound like a viable runner to me, but I don't know the details. I think we just have to be careful, though, with what acquisitions are made, and we have to be, you know, they have to demonstrate value and not just simply solve a problem that somebody else has got in that case. Compulsory purchase, well, I don't know if you've ever tried to do compulsory purchase, but it's not exactly easy and it's usually very expensive and with uncertain end results. So, you know, it's not a panacea, compulsory purchase. So I think those are the questions that I noted at the time. I think there might be something on Ukrainian housing, which we probably need to get back to Councillor Vigar on, but I think that's most of the points that were raised.
Thank you. In accordance with the Constitution, there will be a recorded vote on this item. Please indicate on your microphone console whether you are voting for the motion, against the motion, or if you're abstaining from the motion. I will allow 20 seconds for members to vote. The plus is yes, the minus is no, and the cross is abstain. We have the result in 476 against 0, abstains 2. The motion is carried. Thank you very much for voting. We now move on to item 10, the Wiltshire Local Plan Review, and I once again call upon Councillor Nick Bottrell as Cabinet Member with responsibility for development management and strategic planning to introduce this item. The report is at pages 149 to 508 of your summons. Appendix 3 to the report was published on its own supplement. Councillor Bottrell, I called for you to present and move recommendations, then look for a Cabinet Member to second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's like weariness coming up now, isn't it? Look.
Can I perhaps ask you to formally move, and then I can get Richard?
Okay, formally
Thank you.
move.
Thank you.
Right. I'll sit down again or stand up? Okay. Right. Yes. This is one of the most important things that we as a council do. Simple as that. And there are four very broad, but I think very powerful points that I want to start off by making and asking that the full council considers these and endorses this pre-submission draft local plan and recommends that it goes to Regulation 19 consultation. And those important points that I want to stress are, first one, on housing numbers, overall housing numbers. So this plan covers the period to 2038. And it is prepared on the basis of a much lower housing need, overall housing need, than was envisaged previously. The raw figures are something in the order of 8,000 less homes than previously. And this reduction, while supported by evidence, also accords with the administration's stated desire not to build any more new homes than are required. It's about meeting Wiltshire's need. It's about building the homes which are required. We have absolutely no desire to concrete over this county. And this is about meeting reasonable need. I do want to stress that. Also, the majority of the 36,740 new homes are actually already accounted for by committed development sites, permissions granted, or actually, in some cases, homes that have been built. And that leaves a balance of approximately 14,500. Half of these can be accommodated on the additional new site allocations that are contained in this plan. The remaining 7,000 left to be identified in the future 14 years, during which, of course, there will be plan updates to take account of circumstances. But those are the bare bones of this plan and how the numbers fit together. So with this lower total, and taking into account the envisaged phasing, and there's a bit of, say, phasing, we're developers, we're relying on developers to deliver, so we have to accept that there's a market, so it's not entirely science, but the envisaged phasing would suggest that over the next 7 years, rather than an average of over 2,500 new homes being built in Wiltshire, we would be seeing 35% less than that, or 1,470, 35% less. So that's a big reduction in the number of homes coming forward year on year. It represents a big change in the pace of development. And more importantly, I think, 40% of these would be affordable. That's what we're looking for. Provision of more affordable housing seems to come back time and time and time again on the doorsteps from residents as a key need for Wiltshire. And I'm pleased this administration is looking to deliver on that. The next major point that I come to is how the plan will help deliver the council's zero carbon ambitions. Not only are the standards of new buildings to be significantly improved by way of minimum energy standards, but also this plan anticipates ancillary solar panels on the roofs, on which will start to contribute towards carbon offsetting as well. I can't obviously summarize, or I can't obviously go into huge detail here in a time-limited speech, but these are quite frankly, this suite of proposals are quite frankly some of the toughest standards that have survived the independent inspection process that any local authority has put forward so far. So they will help maintain Wiltshire's position at the forefront of carbon reduction in this country. And they mark, again, our ambition to make things happen and to actually get to our low carbon commitments as quickly as possible. On the environmental side, brownfield sites, we keep getting told we're not developing brownfield sites fast enough. Brownfield sites are to be prioritised. Biodiversity net gain, plus 20%, not the government's set level, minimum level, plus 10. We're talking about plus 20%. Again, huge step change in pace. And again, putting Wiltshire at the forefront of environmental improvements. The third major point I want to touch on is about the Wiltshire economy. So not only is it important for the county to have sufficient homes, but it's also just as important that we have sufficient future jobs. So we need to do everything possible to ensure that we have the employment space, but also in the right areas, and that it's the right type of employment space that will allow our county to prosper. Lots of people have said to me, we don't need to worry about new jobs. Unemployment is currently very low. Well, of course, that is the case. It is quite low here. But failure to anticipate the future, failure to put employment space in the right areas will, over time, lead to businesses moving out. We are actually even now seeing some evidence that is the case, because they just sort of simply have nowhere to expand. They will not have the right facilities. They'll not be in the right location. And we won't attract the new businesses of the future either. So if we fail to actually grasp this nettle, then actually, in the end, we'd be selling out our residents' futures. Also, this plan contains a lot more stringent clauses about ensuring that employment land is actually used as employment lands, because too often, happened in the past, developers are obliged to provide land set aside for employment space or build employment units, and yet somehow they manage to show, oh, well, there's no demand in this area or whatever. So those loopholes are going to close. If it's going to be for employment, it's going to remain for employment. And we should see a big change with what's proposed here. And the fourth point, and you'll be probably pleased to know this, the final main point, is that while I can talk about this and laud the ambition and stress the positives, I also fully understand that many aspects of this plan are contentious. There are plenty of different views out there, and site selection is, by its very nature, likely to be difficult to satisfy everyone's demands. I'm reminded of the old Churchill reflection that the only thing worse than having allies is not having allies. Well, site selection can make the development plan process seem fraught to members and residents alike. But the one thing worse than progressing with a plan would be not progressing with a plan. Benefits of proceeding to Regulation 19 consultation, as proposed here, are that we're going to be safe from the adverse impact of the application of the 5-year land supply. This rule, which has led to unplanned, unwanted development up and down the county, which has been really nothing short of riding a coach and horses through the concept and practice of plan-led development. We would be safe from that. While under consultation, a 4-year land supply figure would apply, we are assured. We're currently at 4.6, so clearly we would meet that. And when the plan is in place, we will then be safe again for a 5-year period. And during that time, obviously, the plan would be refreshed and updated, so it would be ready in another 5 years. So this is a way of not being run by the 5-year land supply. And I stress that as probably being one of the most important factors for proceeding at the moment. Just to conclude, and I'll obviously be very interested to hear the contributions from members, but I think it's worth reiterating there are clear and demonstrative benefits for moving forward now. All the compilation that's in these documents from the start has been evidence-led. The result is a plan for Wiltshire, the whole of Wiltshire, its residents and its businesses, and it fully complements the council's business plan. So it will help secure the future growth and a type of growth which is sustainable from the point of view economically, socially, and environmentally. So that is why it is important that we move to Regulation 19 now. Again, just to stress that it's not to say I don't understand there are concerns, there are local issues, there are things that people would rather not see probably in this plan. But overwhelmingly, it is in the interest of all of us to move to Regulation 19 now. And that is why I'm proposing that we do that.
Thank you, Councillor Bottrell, for your presentation. I'll now move on to the group leaders, and we'll hear from Councillor Richard Cleworth.
Thank you, Chair. Before I come on to my comments, I just wanted to thank officers in particular for all the work that's gone into developing this plan. It's been an interesting process. Historically, perhaps we've, as Cabinet or politicians, not been particularly involved in areas around shaping policy. That's not been the approach we've taken, and we've had some very robust discussions over the course of the development of the plan. I also want to thank Nick for the work he's put in. It's been a hugely time-consuming, complex process. Plans break down to two elements. You've got site allocations. And I want to be really clear, there has been no political involvement in those whatsoever. They are evidence-led, entirely evidence-led, and the sites that have come forward have done so following the work that officers have done to look into and assess each of those sites and work out which ones need to come forward to meet the demands as allocated. And then you've got the policies. And the policies are, I think, the most important element. They're about how we shape development in the county. And there we've had a lot more involvement. We stood as the Conservatives on a manifesto that made a lot of points around the local plan. And those we've been pushing very hard in the policies that we're now seeing. So all new housing in Wiltshire would be built to a zero carbon standard effectively inside this plan if it's approved by an inspector. And everything I'm going to say is subject to an inspector approving it. We said we'd do that. This delivers it. It does it looking at the work that Cornwall and Baines have done and already got through an inspector. We said we'd go beyond enhancing our natural environment, preserving our environment, linking up areas of nature habitat. 20% biodiversity net gain, which the evidence has shown is viable, meets the viability test for this plan. It's not just an aspiration, it's something that we believe can be delivered by developers and allow them still to deliver housing in the way that government sets out. That is being delivered in this plan. Cycling routes, the fact that we've had settlements, and I come back to Fuggleston Red, that were built with no footpath or cycle path connecting them to the settlement they were on the edge of, that is now resolved in this plan to ensure that all settlements will have that linkage. You shouldn't need to make it explicit, but we are making it explicit. To make sure that our villages have the ability to get more affordable housing in, where there is need, not simply because someone wants to build it, but where there's need, through the rural exception policy, which has been a good policy, but the incentive has not been there for landowners to bring land forward. So we're looking at easing that very slightly to enable a landowner to get some value from the land they bring forward, maybe up to 30%, depending on viability, but still deliver at least 70% affordable housing in our villages, which desperately need affordable housing. As a council, we're building council housing in our villages. Our housing associations sadly are selling off the council housing that used to exist in our villages. So we've got to find ways to bring that back. And again, it's got to be driven by demand. It's not someone saying, oh, I want to build houses. There's evidence of demand, of need for housing in a village, and therefore we're facilitating making that easier. As Nick's mentioned around commercial development, far too often, I think there's been one site since Wiltshire's been created where employment land was actually built as employment land. So we are being absolutely blunt that developers are responsible for getting that employment land brought forward as employment land, and if they can't do it, we'll take over and market it for them. So we're going to make sure that we get the employment land built next to developments, which will ease the strain on our roads. I could go on and on. I probably better not. Local plans are fraught processes. The tension around please don't build on near to me or on this bit of land which we think is special is significant, and I entirely understand it. I've got some of the most contentious sites are in my division. Sven and I have been bombarded with emails from residents who are raising concerns, and I want to emphasize what we're doing here is approving this plan for consultation. We're not saying this is the plan full stop. We are saying it goes out to be consulted on, and residents need to bring forward evidence in that consultation to say if there are reasons around flooding or the environment or archaeology, whatever planning reasons that could still see change to the plan as it is. So it's not a fait accompli. It's to say, this is the plan as we see it. We're now going to go out for that most formal of consultations to find out whether it is sound before it then goes on to the inspector. So I think that's really important to acknowledge as well. I'm coming to the end of my time. I won't keep you further. This is a really good plan. It's taken a huge amount of effort to pull together. It delivers on the promises that we made to the people of Wiltshire, and it delivers on all of them. Is it without contention? No. Planning is often finding the least bad option, but this is a very, very good plan in terms of policies, and the sites, people are going to need to, I guess, judge for themselves, but I commend it to you.
Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Chairman. An awful lot has been said by the Cabinet member and by the leader, of which we would absolutely agree. This is a piece of work which has been done great. People have contributed to it in a very professional and evidence-based way. There is no doubt that there is great gain to be had from it. Not least, it's the promise of carbon neutrality, the improvement in water quality, particularly in the south of the county, and the biodiversity net gain and actions against climate change have to be commended absolutely everywhere. But nevertheless, when the briefing took place in this room and news was released to towns and parishes throughout the county, there was nevertheless a great deal of furore. And that furore really came out of what has already been turned about, not least the site selections which have been chosen. And the nub of the issue for us, and we will be putting this to you, is whether or not Section 19 or Regulation 19 is the right path to go at this moment, or whether there should be a pause and an adoption of Regulation 18 instead. Now, the report makes very clear that in 2017, this process kicked off with the Regulation 18 consultation. But much has taken place since 2017, not least a global pandemic and multiple changes in councils through the elections of 2021, that when things came to this room, most people were new and did not know of the process. And indeed, most things went directly to council or to cabinets, beg your pardon, without any intervening communications being released from 2017 to ordinary members. So it took them by great surprise. So we believe that Regulation 18 will give people a greater say and a greater involvement in choosing for themselves what is best for them in their communities. Most people right now are saying, what was the point of our doing our neighbourhood plans when most of these things go against them? So helping people understand is better than forcing through a Regulation 19, which really means closing the show down. So, so our recommendations will be to you to take a pause, refresh the knowledge within our midst, refresh the knowledge within the towns and parishes, and make sure that everybody is involved, and take a little bit more time to do things through Regulation 18. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll try and be as brief. Councillor Botterill was saying about what's been happening. As somebody that sits on both an area planning committee and spatial, I would say that the situation we're currently in is more like planning anarchy, because we're all aware of the appeals that are being lost all over the place. And whilst I'm not happy, should we say, with the local plan, I think not to go forward for Reg 19 consultation would be disastrous. We had Reg 18 some years ago, and I'm surprised how long this has taken to come forward. But I think to go back again is just going to open up another can of worms that everybody's had a chance to have a go at. At the Cabinet meeting, there was a few comments that were quite interesting that I've got down here. Nick Thomas, growth is not appropriate in this location. Well, I'm sure most parishes and even towns will be saying that. Councillor Dr. Brian Matthew, imagination and vision. This doesn't seem to have enough of it. But as Councillor Botterill was saying, what else can we do at this moment? If we don't go ahead with this plan, we are just left in limbo. And we really need to go somewhere. Otherwise, the developers are just going to walk all over Wiltshire because we will not have anything there. The 5-year land supply, as we're aware, we're short of. But as you say, if we go along, we can come back to a 4-year supply. At least it helps us out with that a little bit more. The chap from Savills at Cabinet meeting mentioned Section 18. As I say, I think it would be disastrous to go back to that again, because we'd be covering old ground, Chairman. Councillor Clure said evidence-led basis. With the greatest of respect, it would seem that from bits of the plan I've looked at, the evidence-led basis that Wiltshire Council has led on is basically, does a landowner want land built on? There seems very little evidence from the council as to why some of these areas should actually be justified. But again, that is up to those local councils and action groups to take it forward to the inspector chairman and let him make his or her make their decision when it comes forward. Consultation, I understand, won't take place until the end of September. If that is the case, I'm very happy with that, because I think what would be awful is if this council was to start consulting the public during the school holidays, it would just look so bad for all of us. So I would urge that consultation takes place, if that's allowable, if you can do it after the school holidays have completed. Finally, Chairman, if I can be very parochial just for 30 seconds and address it to the directors and Councillor Botterill, Section 3 of the motion that's there. I'm very pleased to see change number 90. This is progress, this is to do with Hilton area. That change number 90 has been put in. But could I ask them again, please, to look at whether the land should be described as east of Hilperton? Because again, we're still talking about north of Trowbridge. North is up that way, east is where it is. Policy 53, the same thing is with that one. And again, I would urge them, policy 54, they're still referring to the North Trowbridge Country Park, which is within Hilperton. There just seems to be something with the spatial planners that Hilperton doesn't exist. I don't understand why, but again, that's something that I can take forward. But in general, Chairman, as I say, I think I will be supporting this, much as I disagree with a lot of it, because I think not to go forward would leave us in a really, really nasty situation. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Ricky Rogers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Two things I just want to get off my chest is one, that I built hundreds of homes in my 53 years in the construction industry. And then the other thing is, in my 35 years in local government, we always seem to be fighting national housing targets and allocation numbers. It's not new, we've always been doing that. I remember almost a decade ago when we at Wiltshire Council here were then looking at, at horror at the target numbers, and we said, let's go out and have conversations with our communities, with our parishes. Let's urge them to draw up neighbourhood local plans to protect those communities and find exactly what they want, what they need, how we can support them. And we've done that. And it just seems to me that what I'm reading in the proposals, we've almost led them up the garden path. They spent hundreds and hundreds of hours, many parishes, building up and drawing up their local neighbourhood plans. And now we're just abandoning them for something different. And I certainly, as it's written there, I cannot support those proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Now, with the time approaching 20 to 1, I now propose that we take a lunch break and we'll reconvene at 20 past 1. Thank you very much, and we'll see you at 20 past 1. Thank you, councillors. I'm now going to reconvene today's meeting. We've got the item of the debate, so I will now open the item to debate. Any member wishing to speak, please press the button on your microphone console to be added to the queue of speakers. And I start with Councillor Brian Matthew.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'm proposing an amendment which I think is being put up, and you can see it. It changes all of one letter from 19 to 18. This plan, which will last up to 2038, is a vital document for our country, for our county, in terms of land use for development purposes, for housing, employment, in the environment, and the climate emergency. The purpose of this amendment, should it be adopted, is to bring members, town and parish councillors, and members of the public up to speed and to take their views into consideration under Regulation 18 consultation. I'm pleased with much of what is being proposed in the local plan review, and I congratulate the officers on their work. However, I'm conscious, following the furore expressed at the recent members' briefing, that we need to be sure that we get it right. And for this to happen, we need to be content that best practice is being adopted in its formulation. And for this to happen, I suggest that Regulation 18 procedures must be adopted right up to preferred option stage, so that local people, town and parish councillors, and indeed ourselves as the local members can have full and proper involvement in scrutinising the emerging plan right up to the preferred option stage. An argument that we have to rush now to Regulation 19 because we don't have a 5-year land supply, I believe doesn't hold water, as there is now only a modest shortfall. Already this sorry situation has led to developers taking advantage in many places in our county, and we should not compound this error with what appears to be rushed planning under Regulation 19, and thus fails to take into account vital local knowledge, especially when what we have on the table now, which is different as to what was originally proposed. The local plan is too important and too far-reaching to be judged as lacking in proper public consultation up to and including the final preferred option stage. There is case evidence from other counties, from Oxfordshire, for example, to show that Regulation 18 can be repeated and that this is of additional importance when there's been such a long delay since the process was started. Once we get to Regulation 19, there is very little, if anything, that can be done to change the local plan. The inspector's remit is similarly restricted, as their role is not to look at individual sites, but just to ask if the plan as a whole is sound or not. Thus, to continue under Regulation 19 risks the whole plan being judged unsound and being sent back. So let's make sure that this is sound by being thorough and adopting Regulation 18 to the preferred option stage. We thus propose the amendment that you see in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Thank you, councillor Grant. I now move to the mover of the original motion, ask whether they are willing to accept the amendment. Councillor Butterell. Okay. Okay, in that case, we will now debate the amendments. I'll go to group leaders to start with. Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Chair. My goodness, I'm a little bit bemused now. We've had 2 Regulation 18 consultations already on this local plan. 2. But now we want to have a third. And what would the result of a third be? Well, what would it be that we haven't already gathered? It's an evidence-based process. It would provide the same evidence that a Reg 19 consultation would equally provide, and yet get us no further forward. It would basically delay a year. And what would that year mean? That would mean another year of no 5-year housing land supply. Government have made it clear, if you're within 2 years of getting your local plan adopted, then under the planning bill, the levelling up and planning bill, you will get a requirement not to set a 5-year housing land supply, but a 4-year housing land supply, which we have. But no, your amendment would mean, no, we'd still need a 5-year housing land supply, and we'd still have free-for-all development across the county. What do you want? Councillor Grant, do you want Malmesbury to double in size before we get a local plan in place? Because that's what will happen. Do we want Chippenham, Calne, Horsham, Malmesbury, Amesbury, Melksham to continue to get speculative applications? Our villages, Roud has a speculative application in at the moment. Many of you do. Is that what we want to see? A continuation of speculative development, when by instead of moving forward now to Reg 19, we can end that because we know we've got a 4-year housing land supply. I spoke earlier about the fact that our manifesto made some very clear commitments about the local plan, and we're delivering all of them. I seem to recall the Liberal Democrats standing on the basis of no more building in green fields, yet here they're saying, well, let's have another year at 2,400 free-for-all, so we can go back out to yet another, a third consultation. That makes no sense to me. It also would delay the delivery of zero-carbon housing. So that's what, another 2,400 houses built that would need retrofitting within 5 years. Doesn't make any sense to me. It would mean that for at least another year, we would have biodiversity net gain targets set at 10%. That comes into effect from November, at 10%, not at the 20% that this plan will put in place. It means for another year that all the housing built in Wiltshire will be looking, well, almost all of it, everything apart from a small corner, will be looking at 30% affordable housing targets, not the 40% that this plan will put in place. It will mean another year that rural exception sites are basically only viable if you've got a farmer who's willing to give up land for essentially nothing. It'll be another year of developers to get in there and develop out those commercial sites, those employment land sites, before we're able to actually provide any enforcement to make them be developed for employment land, for the sake of a third Regulation 18 consultation. We've discussed this in detail with officers. The advice is very clear. We need now to move to a Reg 19 consultation to get this plan in place. Another Reg 18 is just going through the same process again and again and again. And the result is no coordinated planning, no 5-year land supply, no sustained, organised, and no net zero development in Wiltshire for that time period. I can't believe you're proposing it. I honestly can't. I urge everyone to vote against this.
Yes, Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I can say is heaven forbid that we should ever consider asking people what they think. Heaven forbid that we should ever go to our towns and parishes and say, here is something that we have done. Tell us what you think. Heaven forbid that we should ever open our channels of communication so that people, ordinary people sat at the back here, cannot have an input that they ought to have or behalf, just so that he can avoid a five-year land supply issue coming forward. There is pain wherever you look. There is pain of waiting an additional year. There is pain in adopting a plan which is incomplete, as the lady at the back said earlier on. There is no synergy between housing, employment, development and infrastructure, because the local transport plan has been put back and put back again. There is no synergy between them. And I certainly would like to hear the views of town and parish councils in that respect. So I urge you, think for yourselves, stand up for yourselves, stand up for consultation, and stand up and let the people know you're on their side. I urge you to support the motion.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's not often that I find myself agreeing with Councillor Kluwer, but I regret on this one I do. We've had Reg 18, as I said earlier. The parish councils have had their opportunity. I'm sure, like Hilperton and every other one, much information was provided to the spatial planners. Whether or not it was listened to, we don't know, but we've now moved on to Reg 19. If we go out again for Reg 18, what is the proposer and secretary proposing we do when we get the answers to that? Because that's not going to keep everybody happy. You're still going to have people that don't like what's proposed. So do we go to Reg 18 again? There has to be a point when we draw a line under this. And as I say, much as I don't like a lot of this plan, I think now is the time we need to get this moving, get it out to the inspector, and whether we like it or not, at least Wiltshire will have something that will stop landowners saying how they want to protect the future of their local town and offer land up for building. And at least we'll be building to a plan and not just having speculative applications coming all the time because we haven't got anything to stop them. So I regret I won't be supporting this, Chairman.
Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. Very interesting debate. I hope there's some further contributions. I'm still sitting on the fence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now open the item to debate on the amendment you see before you there. Any member wishing to speak, please press the button on your microphone console to be added to the queue of speakers. I have Councillor Dean. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would urge people to actually support this motion for Regulation 18. Ordinarily, I would agree that the council should get on with things, but this is a matter of such controversy and public interest that I really do think that residents should have their say. And if they don't have their say and don't contribute, the effects can be disastrous on their communities. Look at my ward, where land was zoned for a civic amenity recycling centre and a dump, and ended up with them building an incinerator on it as a result of the local community, not at the time of the preparation of the local plan, being exactly clear about what was planned for that site. And if I may say so, being misled by the developer in some ways. So I really do hope that you do this. If you don't go for a further period of consultation in this way, I think that your residents, your town and parish councils, your city council are likely to say that you haven't acted in a democratic way. And I would urge you, I think it's good politics to try and bring your communities with you as far as you can with planning, and letting everyone have a final say on this document now that it has been published in this format, I think seems to me to be a very sensible thing to do. Councillor Dr. Brian Matthews was right as well, I think, despite the sort of hyperbole from Councillor Cure that this is going to be the end of Western civilization as we know it. Actually, Dr. Matthews is right. Now that the housing numbers have come down so much, and now that we have an emerging local plan review that is published, planning committees, council officers, PINs can all give this document weight while this is out to consultation. So that's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This just means that we are giving our communities one final say. And I do think in some cases that there are certainly going to be changes that people are going to want to make. And some of those changes are going to be of major significance. A very good example in my patch is obviously my community wants a Westbury bypass. Obviously, the North-South Department for Transport plan is in the process of being published. We're going to want to be able to respond to that consultation. So it's really important. And more generally, you know, our residents are going to expect us to be able to demonstrate where things like transport infrastructure to support growth is going to come. You can only do that if you go out to consultation once again. So I would urge everybody to support Regulation 18. I think it's a very pragmatic and sensible thing.
Councillor Rich Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting this amendment. I think we've had plenty of consultation already on the 19 on the regulation agreement already, and this, I have to say, is very typical of the Liberal Democrats wanting to kick things down a touch, not wanting to make a decision, keep repeating and repeating and repeating the same thing until they get the answer they want. Well, frankly, there's been enough talk, there's been enough time, enough consultation already, and it's about time that we put this matter to the bed and stick with the original proposal. I'm actually surprised with Councillor Dean's response as well. After all he said about we need to be doing more action on the capital projects, and now he wants to enforce some sort of delay on pushing this one forward. So I won't be supporting the amendment. I think the original proposal to go with Regulation 19 is exactly what we're doing. It's on the side of residents. It's not on the side of pernicious developers. And if we go back to Regulation 18, it puts too much in the hands of developers, and we'll have that free-for-all that none of us want. We want the development that matches the needs of the county and not matches the profits of developers. Thank you.
Councillor Berry.
It's okay, I'm on my meds now. I'm sort of calmed down. So things are a bit better, a bit lovelier. After I spoke to the leader and Councillor Nick Bottrell, I was concerned, like you are clearly concerned, about elements of the plan, elements of those not being consulted, but I'm assured that we can do that in the process of Reg 19. So I wouldn't worry too much. I think what we need to do is we have a dirty, great big hole in the boat. We need to patch that right now, because at this point in time, people are coming up, chucking in planning applications ad nauseam, and we're being forced to take them on board because we don't have a 5-year land supply. We fix the boat right now, we can stop it taking water and then deal with the problems later. Carry on rowing, everybody. So please, don't push us back to the start again, because we've got at least within a couple of lengths of the opposition, and I think we have an opportunity to overtake them. So hold back and let us go to Reg 19. Thank you.
Councillor Steve Bucknell.
Thank you. Nick Bottrell, you said earlier this is one of the most important things we as councillors do, and I entirely agree with you. So then why is it that Councillor Clure, you say proudly that members have had no involvement whatsoever in certain major aspects of this local plan process? How can it be both one of the most important things we do, and yet at the same time, we're not involved in it? I believe that the process so far has been flawed. I think that officers have been working on this local plan now for more than 5 years, and in that entire time, I can't think that they've met with the town council I'm a member of, Royal Wootton Bassett Town Council, on more than 3 occasions. The last Reg 18 consultation was during the COVID lockdown. Not ideal, not the council's fault, but it made it very, very difficult for a roadshow to be organised and proper consultation to be held. More than 5 years and more than 800 pages of a local plan have been produced, and it was put in front of members on the 4th of July, put in front of Cabinet on the 11th of July, and is in front of us now on the 18th of July. 2 weeks to read and digest 800 pages of dense plans, policies, preambles. Hands up if you've read all 800 pages of this local plan. I thought not. I thought not. I believe that one of the reasons I felt so very frustrated, you may recall how frustrated I felt on the 4th of July. One of the reasons I felt so very frustrated is because this is yet another step along the way, I believe, to a democratic deficit within Wiltshire. I wasn't a fan of Wiltshire going unitary. I'll rephrase that. I wasn't a fan of Wiltshire going into one unitary council. I thought it may make 2 unitary councils quite nicely. But one unitary council is difficult in such a large geographic area, split in half by the Salisbury Plain. And whilst there are some benefits to being unitary, mostly financial, one of the disbenefits of being such a large unitary council is that it's really, really difficult to do local democracy. And you have to carry on working really, really hard at it. So I feel frustrated that particularly with this local plan, which covers a vast area with very different locations, very different settlements, Salisbury City, Trowbridge, Rawalton, Bassett, Malmesbury, all very, very different places. It's difficult to get that democracy to work well. That's the first deficit of democracy with this local plan. The second deficit of democracy is, as we've heard, it has been utterly, utterly officer-led. Now, we've been told it's an evidence-based process. But when it comes to the most important decisions that we, as a Western democracy, make, whether it's in the court or whether it's in council, we get evidence put to us by those whose job it is to gather and analyse and present that evidence. And then that evidence is judged by a jury, by good men and true, and ladies, of course. And there'll be some of you that are thinking, yeah, well, this is it. This is where we are making our judgment. This is where the councillors are having their say. But it's not. All that we are being asked to do today is to put this forward as a Regulation 19 consultation process. And do not be fooled into thinking that that is a proper consultation process. It is only, with the inspector, as we've heard, the inspector will only be looking at the plan as a whole. He will not be, she will not be looking at individual site allocations. It will be down to local communities to try to prove that these sites are not deliverable. And guess what? That's going to be the devil's own job, bearing in mind that the proposers of these sites, the landowners, will be throwing every consultant they can think of and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds trying to prove that their sites are deliverable. The chances are that none of the sites that are allocated in this local plan at the moment will ever get turned over. So let's look at the local plan and why it's come to us as it has.
Councillor Bucknell, you only have 15 seconds.
Yet another deficit of democracy. There are very many errors in this local plan. There are pages and pages of errors. In Wootton Bassett alone, there's reference to Beaversbrook. Well, that's calm. There's reference to an application by Tesco to the west of the town that was refused.
Your 5 minutes is
I would beg you to let me carry on.
You can have a very short amount of time, but very, very little, because we have a lot of speakers queuing up, and we will be here for a very long time.
This plan has been rushed. So many errors that we need to address properly through a Regulation 18 process. I have been a councillor, a Conservative member, a member of the Conservative Party for 25 years, and a councillor for most of that. This is the closest I have ever come to voting against a Conservative proposal. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to support the amendment.
Thank you. I can understand your passion, but again, democracy is about being fair and equal. And if some people speak for 10 minutes, then that's not really fair on everybody else either. So I'd like everybody to stick to 5 minutes, then we can all be fair and equal. Thank you. Councillor Seed.
Thank you, Chair. Regulation 18. Councillor Matthews proposes a Regulation 18 extended consultation and justifies it by saying how much we need it, but quietly dropped in that we have a modest shortfall in our 5-year housing land supply. I'm afraid this is a nonsense. Councillor King urges us to look after our residents, and that is precisely, Councillor King, why I am opposing Councillor Matthews' amendment. I think this is opposition for opposition's sake, and I don't think it does any of us any good to extend this consultation process. It is the modest shortfall mentioned by Councillor Matthews that has caused the village of Semmington, that I represent, to have 3 predatory and forced developments in the past 3 years. And that is one of the reasons, and the main reason, why I'm standing here speaking today. It is clear that a modest shortfall is not good enough for the Planning Inspectorate to respect our housing land supply, be it 4.7 or whatever it is at the time. We need to do better. And on the contrary, the housing land supply that we have, that you say is a modest shortfall, is a green light for the developers who are coming in and building where they choose, and that has to stop. So I would urge that we go with Regulation 19, reject this amendment of Regulation 18, and give our residents the tools to resist unacceptable and predatory developments from this autumn and not next year or sometime in the future. Because I think that is particularly important to a lot of our residents and certainly to the residents of the village of Semmington that I represent.
Councillor McLennan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to support Regulation 19 because Regulation 19 will put a stop, in theory, to predatory development. However, Regulation 18 affords the opportunity for residents that I represent to put their case for why one site in particular should not be in this local plan. To date, they've not had that opportunity. So the only way that I can support is if you give an undertaking that during the process of today, we as councillors will be allowed to represent our residents because they can't represent themselves or send a message on their personal behalf to us. So we're the only ones left who can do that. So if we go to Regulation 19 today, then as Councillor Bucknell said, that's the end of the road. Every site that's in this document will be built on. No shadow of a doubt, and there'll be more to come. Every policy that's in there stays, unless the officers can make a minor adjustment. So what we're deciding at this moment is whether that's okay. So when you look around yourselves and think, yeah, we've got to get it in, we've got to get it, is that actually in the interest of your local people about that local site that they're going to be up in arms about because they never knew anything about it until now? And if so, I would think again as to whether that's really what you're representing. Now, I would like to vote for 19 because I want an end to this shortfall, because this shortfall has cost me and my parish lots. The council costs the rest with all the sites they put in. So I'm in a position where it doesn't actually matter to me if 19 goes through or not. It's important that 18 goes through because then my residents will know they have a say. But I prefer that 19 went through so that but with the undertaking that if I say today I would like a site removed, and I will later, that you will say, that's okay, Ian. If that's what your residents and you've got evidence to say it want, then we will remove it because it has not been consulted upon to date. So that's the only way that I would not support this amendment, because it's a step too far. 19, it's all over. Everything in that document is finished. No site ever gets removed. Thank you.
Councillor Alford.
Hey, there we go. Right, okay, so look, I'm not just astonished, but really a bit saddened and disappointed to hear Councillor King and your colleagues with this. I think, to be honest with you, you let yourself down. You've had an opportunity to do the right thing for your community. You've had an opportunity to show responsibility, bit of leadership, and you've gone with the cheap option. You've gone with the headline, and you're ignoring the substance and the importance of this plan and what it's going to offer. This plan is crucially important. It's a crucially important shape-placing document, and it's vital for delivering the investment, the infrastructure, the economic growth, and homes within our communities. Now, delaying it, which is your plan, won't only lead to our inability to demonstrate the 5-year land supply, the increase in underplanned development, but it creates deeper complications that, unfortunately, I don't think you've given consideration to. You haven't sort of thought about the sort of second and third order consequences of your actions. Not for the first time, so I'll forgive you for that, but nonetheless, I feel I need to point them out. Look, if you delay this, you try to delay it, you undermine the neighbourhood planning process. As those plans rattle through the system, they lose their 3-year land supply protection if they don't get renewed and updated. If we can't allocate the sites, those plans can't allocate the sites in the review. They can't do their job. We lose a 5-year land supply, you undermine the neighbourhood plan protections. The plan provides for 6 new primary schools, 2 new nursery schools, a secondary school extension, additional funding and investment for 8 existing schools. It safeguards lands for another a secondary school, in fact, one in Chippenham. It safeguards land for 2 nurseries. Now, it also provides for thousands of new places. Each of these investments, each of these opportunities for our children will be delayed. I mean, how much more delay do you want in our infrastructure spending? How much more delay do you want to the classroom investment? Like, you talk about education and putting it centre stage, but you're neglecting it for a headline. It's so disappointing and frustrating. In Malmesbury, we've got to put it out, in Malmesbury, there's a residual of 0 houses in this plan. You delay this for 12 months, that's 12 months of unplanned development. Have you not got enough in Malmesbury? You want more unplanned, unscheduled development. I think one of the other crucial things that's not been appreciated as well is our affordable housing policy. At the moment, the policy is 40% across the county, but 30% in the Old West Wilts area. If you're a resident of Trowbridge, Melksham, Bradford and Avon, if you're a resident of Westbury and you need an affordable home, it's a struggle. Now, our officers are working hard. They've placed 3,000 households into affordable housing over the last 2 years. Our officers, working through the 106 process, working with planners, delivered 1,300 affordable homes. Right, that's helping us address an incredibly serious need. But if you delay this plan, in those areas of West Wilts, you don't get the 40% affordable homes that this plan offers, you get 30%. That is literally hundreds of less affordable homes that will come on stream because of your actions today. Don't go for the cheap headline. Take responsibility and help the most vulnerable in our community. Help the children who need better schools. Help the communities that need that proper plan development and the investment in the biodiversity and the enhancements to their environment. Let's just get on, take responsibility and do the right thing. Vote against, no offense, vote against the amendment and vote for Regulation 19.
Councillor Smith.
Further than the previous speakers. let's just remember why we have this problem with the 5-year housing land supply. We've got a Conservative Wiltshire Council failing to provide that 5-year land supply, and we've got a Conservative national government undermining neighbourhood plans with botched tweaks to the regulations. That's why our neighbourhood plans run out of date after 2 or 3 years, after hundreds and thousands of hours of local volunteer effort being put into them. So that's why we have this problem. Let's let the public be aware of that. So the background of this local plan review was it actually should have taken place in 2020, given that was 5 years after the approval of the previous local plan in 2015. So we're now told that we shouldn't countenance any further delay, no matter how slight that might be compared to the 3-year slippage we've already seen in the process. So, but I think we should proceed with a more careful approach using the Regulation 18 consultation. Yes, it will take a bit longer, but given the delays that we have already occurred, I think in the interest of getting a better quality plan, more responsive to local knowledge and more robust to legal challenge, which could prove expensive to the council, a little bit more time is required. I might add that it's only going to work if the Cabinet are in listening mode rather than transmit mode. Thank you.
Councillor Kirk.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support everything that Councillor Bucknell said. I am going to support Regulation 18, and there are a number of reasons, really. I do feel that elected members and communities should have more of a say in what happens with such an important document. I am concerned that on one side I'm told that, yes, it can be changed, but it has to be flooding, etc., and the rest of it. But we all know once a development's in that plan, it stays in that plan and something happens to it. You can't just take it out. It's not as easy as we're being informed. I do understand the issues with not having our housing supply. I know the grief it causes and speculative development, but we haven't got an ideal solution now. There are areas where, in effect, Wiltshire Council were put in a speculative development on our parishes. So it's been done to us. So I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Adrian Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was a little surprised, and I will be quick. Ignoring substance. We're not ignoring substance. Your proposal is ignoring residents. Undermining the planning process. We're not undermining the planning process. Not having had a 5-year land supply for the last 2 years I've been on council has undermined the planning process. But what I'm more concerned about here, because I would love us to go straight to Regulation 19 and have a 5-year land supply. I've been on strategic planning and I've been asking that question constantly. And I've been asking for strategic planning to come, spatial planning to come to strategic planning and explain why we haven't. That took 2 years to occur, and me asking 5 times in the minutes for that to happen. So I'm 100% behind you all on that. But Regulation 18 is so important that we get this right because, and this is where, when I hear words astonished, surprised, I'm astonished, I'm surprised, because on 2 previous occasions while I've been involved in the council, we've had court cases that we've had to defend. We've had to go to Cardiff and pay money about Silverwood being built because we didn't consult the local community correctly. We had to go to Cardiff and fight in that, and we lost on both occasions, about the HIF bid in Chippenham because we didn't consult the population correctly. I believe, and that is why I'm not going to support Regulation 19, I'm going to support Regulation 18. If we go to 19, we will end up in court again, and we will have delayed the process, not speeded it up. And if we don't go for Regulation 18, we won't get to Regulation 19 quickly enough, and we won't have the 5-year land supply we want at the speed we want it. That's all I've got to say.
Councillor King, Carol King.
Thank you. Councillor Clure mentioned a delay of another year for climate change to do with carbon zero housing. But the Wiltshire Design Guide is out for consultation now, due, I think, to finish at the end of the month. And 10.1.2, no, 1.3, talks about the strategy of new buildings needing to be net zero carbon. And, you know, it quotes the Wiltshire Council climate strategy and does that link as well. So, you know, if this goes through the strategy and is adopted, then, you know, all the plan has to do is say, you know, report to this and quote it. Thank you.
Councillor Greenman.
Thank you, Chair. It would be completely disingenuous of me to pretend that I don't understand the sentiment behind the motion here today. It's well put together, as it would be. That's well thought through. And I applaud it in many ways. But you'll have to forgive me for being slightly precious here and a little bit parochial, because those of us on strategic planning will be only too well aware that we've been battered and bruised through loss of appeal after appeal after appeal over the last year. The 2 Malmesbury appeals, I'm still bruised from today. We've got Great Somerford, we've got Holt, we've got Welland Devizes, Trowbridge, and we will lose them all. And it's absolute nonsense to say that the small villages have any protection at the moment, because they don't. And as it stands, the local plan as it's been put before us may permit development in all those places, but I have to put to you that we have absolutely no protection with what we've got at the moment. And I want to just give you a little bit of a tale in one of my villages, just north of Chippenham, Langley Borough. Some of you will know the village, 124 houses within the main body of the village. They crafted their neighbourhood plan very early in the process. Under my encouragement, it did enable them to resist the first planning application that came forward from Robert Hitchens, the same developer, in fact, that were about to fight over Coat at Devizes. They were able to win the appeal in 2016. They've come back with a more modest application, but the application is still for 230 houses. Bear in mind, this village only has 124 houses to start off with. And if you read the appeal letter, the appeal report, you'd be forgiven for believing there's only one where the appeal inspector is going to go, because throughout the whole of the report, she says, unacceptable impact on heritage assets, irretrievable damage to the open countryside, etc., etc. And then it bites right at the end, on 2 occasions, right at the end of the report. Nonetheless, because I do not consider the shortfall against 5-year housing land supply to be insignificant, I will agree the appeal. Langley Borough are up in arms. I was up in arms. We've considered all ways of trying to overturn it. One of the members of the Langley Borough, Lee Brother, Langley Borough Residents Association, tried to see if we could take judicial review. If they could, there was sufficient money there to have a crack at it. And we're told absolutely not. That tells me that the small villages are absolutely wide open as well. And what I have learned by bitter experience over the time that I've chaired the Strategic Planning Committee is that we are all very much vulnerable while we're left in a limbo state as it is. And if we don't agree the local plan, so I will be voting against this, regrettably, because I've absolutely applaud the sentiment behind it. If we don't agree the local plan today, we leave ourselves wide open to speculative planning application until such time as the local plan is finally brought to fruition. And I can't see that risk. I've been horrified and appalled at what I've seen being approved under appeal over the last 1, 2, or 3 years. I have to say that we cannot afford to be parochial. To do so is disingenuous and leaves Wiltshire as a county compromised to speculative planning application. We have to put this to the local plan through. Refuse, sadly, this amendment, but we have to support the local plan as we see it today, whether we like it or not. It's not the best thing. It's possibly not reached in the best possible way either. I mentioned into the planning peer review that I felt that we should have been more involved
But we're at where we're at. We can't go back and redress all that now. Where we're at today, we've got to get this through and quash the 5-year housing land supply for the good of the whole county. Thank you, Chair.
Can I take this opportunity just to say that councillors can only speak once the amendment, and please do not touch your console when you've been asked to speak. We will enable your microphone from here. Councillor Hubbard.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, could I, through you, ask a question of the council's legal officer, because I'm looking for a clarity, because I'm hearing different things said during this debate, and I'd like to properly understand what Regulation 18 and Regulation 19 are, because I've Googled it, and what it says here is Regulation 18 marks the start of the engagement stage of the plan for the borough and represents the scoping stage to decide what should be included in the plan. And then it says for Regulation 19, consultation is to provide an opportunity for representations to be made on the amendments to the local plan before it is inspected or examined by a planning inspector. So if my interpretation of that is correct, and please do tell me if I'm wrong, and if I might, Chair, after I've had this answer, I would just like to finish what I say. But if my interpretation of that is correct, by moving to section 19 now, we're effectively doing one final formal consultation before it goes to the inspector. It's not a case of this is locked in with the inspector and nothing can change. Could you clarify that for me? Through you, Chair.
Can I invite Perry to clarify?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hubbard, for your question. So to assist members in considering, obviously, at the moment, the amendment and then potentially considering the motion itself. Regulation 18 is a process whereby consultation occurs that allows officers to produce the plan that you see today, that takes those submissions at Regulation 18 into account. That includes evidence, that includes the 800 pages that was referred to earlier, and the whole plan. There's no question that we are then moving into a different part of the process, which is around soundness. That is what the planning inspector will consider. But Councillor Hubbard, through you, Chair, is correct that there is additional consultation as part of Regulation 19. In fact, for the purposes of delivering the local plan to the planning inspector at whichever stage we choose to do that, whatever time we choose to do that, the documentation will include every additional bit of consultation that occurs as part of Regulation 19. We have to document each and every one of those. In fact, we have to say what we considered at 18, how that changed what you're seeing today, and then everything that we considered at Regulation 19 as well. There's a specific provision for that. So in that respect, Chair, through you, Councillor Hubbard is accurate. And I would say one final thing, that's the public inquiry that is likely to occur in order to assist the planning inspector to form a judgment whether our local plan review is sound, both in terms of planning reasons, planning considerations, but also legally sound. And somebody's already referred to the fact that we can be challenged. In order to do that, he or she will consider all of that information in the round. And public inquiry, as the name suggests, indicates that there's a final opportunity for local communities and local councillors to input into the process. So there are, by my reckoning, Chair, through you, 2 further opportunities for additional consultation and input from both communities and councillors as part of that process. I hope that's helpful to members.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. Back to you, Councillor. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Perry. OK, well, that helps me considerably. When I moved to my home in Melksham, out of my office window, I had a lovely view over some fields that form the barrier between Melksham and Melksham Without. lovely gap between there and Barrow Hill. Okay, that had been fought over for years, and it was protected under the core strategy. It's now a building site. They've almost finished building 450 homes on there. Why? Because the five-year housing supply failed, and it just got built on, along with an awful lot of other parts of Melksham, as is, of course, the case for many other communities around the county. Over the last 13 years since I became a councillor, I remember the core strategy going through. I now remember items coming through with our neighbourhood plan group for this local plan. And I remember many times sat in buildings, the rugby club in Melksham, the new community campus at the parish council offices, in meetings, talking about the local plan, talking about Schlar sites, talking about how that met with the emerging local plan, what the town and parish councils wanted to submit and all the rest of it. So I'm slightly confused with the argument there hasn't been the opportunity for parishes to participate, because I've sat in more meetings than I care to remember and talked about it for longer than I really would have liked. I really do feel that I understand that it's not going to be delivering what everybody wants. Planning doesn't. It's why I never, ever stood for district council, because the main thing it did was planning, and all you could do was lose. And this, I think, clearly represents that. You're never... We've got to build the houses. That's not a choice. We've got to allocate them somewhere. We haven't got a choice. Not everybody's going to want to see them built. So there's always going to be... If we're going to wait until everybody's happy before we move on to the next stage, we will just never move on to the next stage. So I think that regretfully, I can't support this amendment, because I think it exposes us to too much risk. I don't want to see more bits of Greenbelt around towns and villages having major developments on them because of failures of land supply. I don't want to see, and this is the worst thing, every single one of those developments that's gone in because of lack of land supply has also basically gone in without proper infrastructure planning. So they've gone in and we've not got schools in the right places. We've not got community facilities in the right places. We haven't properly thought about where healthcare provision or dentistry or any of those other things will be. And sometimes there's not even the road infrastructure to support the homes that are put there, or indeed adequate power or whatever supplies. So let's just make sure that we actually have a proper plan. And Nick, I think earlier on
Councillor Herbert, just 20 seconds.
And I was on my closing line, Chair. You used the thing about walking the walk. There's another one I can think of here, which is to fail to plan is to plan to fail. Let's just get it done.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Gently, Councillor Alford, I don't really need a lecture from you on my duties and responsibilities to the people of Malmesbury. I'd rather leave it to them to decide that in the privacy of the ballot box at the next election. Nor do I require to be told of the problems of the five-year housing land supply, having seen now 5 different developments go through against the principles of the neighbourhood plan for Malmesbury, and to be told, by the way, that this was necessary because this would help sort out the 5-year housing land supply. Well, all of those planning applications which were rejected by Northern Area Planning, by my colleagues Howard Greenman and Steve Bucknell. I've listened carefully, gentlemen, as I always do, as I always listen to my colleagues on Northern Area Planning, but you two in particular, I listened carefully to. We'll know we threw them out and the inspector approved them, and we were told this would help get us to the 5-year housing land supply. Well, hello, those approvals have been given, and here we are, and we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. This, for me, is summed up by the contributions of Howard and Steve, because I think it is a very narrow decision, actually, today, as to whether we wrap ourselves in Regulation 19 and are content that that will protect us. And I do have a question through you, Chairman, to Perry, because I did think I have heard comments about if we are at Regulation 19 stage, then the housing land supply requirement is 4 years rather than 5. And I would like clarity, if I may, through you, Chairman, from the legal director on that matter. But if he can give that at the end, I'm perfectly content, Chairman. It won't alter what I have to say. So I think this is a very nuanced debate here. And to me, the heart of it is, it would be the easiest thing in the world, frankly, from my own narrow divisional point of view and as mayor of the town, to say, let's go to Regulation 19 and that protects us. But the question is, do we actually have, as far as the sites are concerned, this plan right? Are we content with it? And are our communities content with it? And referring back, and I recall them well, the two previous Regulation 18 discussions, and particularly the second one during COVID, I don't think anybody was content with that consultation, candidly, because of the circumstances in which we are in. So if our view is that we have these matters right, and we have our sites right, and our communities are content with those, then you should vote against this amendment today. If your view actually is that it is worthy and proper that we give our parish and town councils, our residents, the right now, in the new context that we sit in, to look again at these sites and to be fully engaged in that consultation, well, then you will vote for this amendment. On balance, and it is on balance, and having listened carefully to Howard's contribution, particularly to yours, Steve, I will be voting for the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Cape.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bottrell started off by saying this is one of the most important things we do. Totally agree with you. Therefore, I beg you to come with us on the amendment. I welcome the fact that committees and task groups were able to comment just before the publication of this draft local plan. I welcome the inclusion of the carbon neutral and biodiversity aims, absolutely. I also welcome the reduction in the housing numbers for the site south of Chippenham. This, as colleagues will remember, was the subject of lengthy discussions around the HIF bid, which, as we all know, ultimately failed. The new numbers deserve full consideration by local groups, town councils, and local members. I note the level of questioning that we had at the beginning of the morning by members around the details in the draft plan as we see it today. There are a lot of concerns around different locations. I'm trying not to be parochial, but I think every one of us in the room feels the need to look at it from that aspect. However, the local plan, as it now stands, has had far too little engagement with local members and residents. This could have been happening over the last 6 months to a year, could it not? We could have been in a room, we could have listened to each other, we could have expressed concerns. That could have all been taken on board. I don't think any of that has happened. Sure, there was consultation going back into the last council. Since then, we've had, as we've heard, pandemic, many changes. We've also got the priority now of achieving carbon neutral and biodiversity net gain. I struggle for any of my local residents to recognise what they see now or what they will see now and compare it to what was on the table a few years ago as the same document. Surely they have the right to be heard, be listened to, meaningful consultation. And I don't see how a 19 consultation is going to provide that for them. Thank you.
Councillor Blair Pilling.
I have actually read it. Okay. I couldn't answer questions in detail. I'm working on it and preparing, and I'll come back to it, a presentation for my community so that they can understand it within the consultation. I just want to speak on two what I think have been, I would class them as misrepresentations within this debate, which have rather tried to rather emotively sway the argument. And I think Councillor John Hubbard, in his thing, actually lay the first one, that this statement that if we go forward from today, this is set in concrete, nothing can change, etc. I think that was established in that exchange. That is simply not the case. So,
Can I stop the conversation? Thank
Sorry,
you.
I'm agreeing with you that it is simply not the case that if we go forward with a 19 consultation, it is set in stone. It's not. I'm told there are examples from previous time around this that sites were taken out at that stage. So, please don't assume that, nothing can change. There are, I understand, 3 outcomes in theory from a Regulation 19. And that is that whatever people like or dislike, no real meaningful evidence comes forward to disprove that what is being proposed is correct. Okay? The second option is there are relatively minor things that need to be tweaked and changed. Okay? The third option is that there's a major problem in this. That's possible. In which case we would have to address that. But that is what this consultation is for in this. And simply going round the boys again, back to Regulation 18, is just people thinking they're getting some other democratic say in this, when frankly they're not. They're just going to get confused by the whole process and wondering what on earth is this council up to in this. So that's my first point. My second point is there was a statement made, this is a officer-led proposal here. That is simply not the case. If you read the Conservative manifesto for the last election and pick out the points from it, you'll see them in here. Where did that come from? It didn't come from the officers, it came from us in this. So please do not portray this as an officer-led exercise. It is not. It has been led by us in this, by the party that is in the administration. Which brings me to my third point, and that is I represent large and small villages and exception sites and so on. And I can tell you that they have been frustrated in the past where they want some affordable housing, they want to, and I have sat in a planning committee, and because that is what the core strategy said, had to vote against what I knew my residents wanted, because that was what the policy said, and it is the job of a planning committee to interpret that policy and rule on it in a quasi-judicial fashion. I can't wait to get on and get these sensible changes to biodiversity, to the climate change, recognising and supporting that, to producing more affordable housing, to doing all those good things that are in this that will simply be put back if all we do is go back and start all over again.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make one point particularly clear, because what Councillor Bear-Pilling has just said is absolutely accurate in terms of this is a member-led local plan. If you go back to our manifesto and then look at the local plan, you will see umpteen items where we are now going to be delivering through the local plan, post the next stage of consultation, and assuming it then goes forward against those manifesto commitments. But when it comes to the actual sites in the plan, when it comes to the allocation of housing numbers in the sites put forward in the plan, that is evidence and officer-led. So there has been no direct member contribution to that because the requirement is that it is officer and evidence-led. But the broad thrust of the overall local plan is that, without a shadow of a doubt, member-led, Conservative member-led, delivering against numerous elements of the manifesto on which we were elected.
Thank you very much. I have no further people wishing to speak, so I now move on to rights of reply, starting with the mover of the amendment, Councillor Matthews. Thank you very much. In that case, I go on to the right reply of the mover of the original motion, Councillor Bottrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just touch on some of those points which have been raised here? The mover of the amendment said that this attempt to have an additional Reg 18 consultation would be about best practice. Well, I can say there's nothing best practice about a Reg 18 consultation. The requirement is for one Reg 18 consultation. We've not come across places that have done 3, or if there are certain reasons why they've done that, and they're not particularly good reasons. So there's nothing best practice about another Reg 18 consultation. Brian talked about a modest shortfall in the 5-year land supply. Well, you know, modest, unfortunately, that is modest enough to allow plan-led development to be coach and horses to be ridden through it. Councillor Dean said a draft plan would still have weight. Well, actually, no, it wouldn't. It only has weight at Reg 19 stage. I'm sorry to disappoint you yet again today, but that is the advice from officers. Moving on, Councillor McLennan thought that Reg 19, nothing changes at Reg 19. Well, I'm informed that last time round, 4 sites were removed from the plan at this Reg 19 stage. So I'm afraid that doesn't also stack up. Councillor Smith, what have I put? Oh dear, oh dear. What can I say? It's not Wiltshire Council, Councillor Smith, that provides the 5-year land supply. 5-year land supply, well, save to the effect of granting planning permission, but that is not the reason we don't have a 5-year land supply. We have granted sufficient planning permissions. 5-year land supply is calculated from the developments, many of which have permissions, which will come forward in the next 5 years. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, and I feel we've missed something out in our training on that one. Councillor Foster talks about the 5-year land supply deficit undermining all our processes. Well, not supporting the Reg 19 at this stage would also undermine our processes. And Carol King says we could rely on the zero carbon statements in our design guide. Well, unfortunately, the design guide is very much that, a guide. It's supplementary planning guidance, and I don't believe you could rely on that for zero carbon development. So that would be far too easy, I'm afraid. Councillor Grant, I think this really gets to the nub of the amendment. And I'd say the proposers, he said it was a balanced judgment, but the proposers of the amendment have actually failed, to my mind, to make clear what exactly are the advantages of a renewed Regulation 18 consultation over a Reg 19 consultation. What would they be? Both are evidence-led, and whether these benefits, which they seem to have failed to really identify, in any way, shape or form, would make up for the very known downsides of not moving to Reg 19 at this stage. And I'm afraid, I think, Councillor Grant, I always follow exactly what you say, because you have often some very interesting things to say. But in this respect, I don't think you've made it obvious what those benefits are, and certainly not that they're sufficient to outweigh the disbenefits. And so that, to me, is why this amendment has to fall. It does not stack up because it does not give a sufficient advantage to the process, and a demonstrable advantage. And that is why we'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Bottrell. Before I move on to the vote, I would like to ask Mr. Holmes to answer Councillor Grant's question.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Grant. So obviously members are considering today the issue of the local plan review under legislation that is in force. The reference to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill is reference to legislation that is not in force, and it may never come into force, and it may never come into force with the proposal, which I will tell you is currently on the face of that bill, that was referred to. So that proposal is that where an emerging plan is submitted for examination, which of course is being proposed today, that's been subject to Regulation 18 or 19 consultation, then authorities will be able to demonstrate a 4-year land supply. We are currently at 4.6 and not the usual 5. So I issue a word of caution to members. Members make the decisions they wish to make, and I'm only here to give advice. But if you check on the parliamentary website, you will see that the bill is in the House of Lords, and it is at report stage. There is a third reading stage. There is then 2 final stages before royal assent. And it is anybody's guess when royal assent will be given. I say that because spring 2023, which I believe has passed, was the first suggested date for royal assent. Well, that's been missed. So, as I say, I offer that advice to members, but also a word of caution.
Thank you very much. We will now move to vote on the amendment. Please indicate on your microphone console whether you are voting for the amendment, against the amendment, or if you're abstaining. I will allow 20 seconds for members to vote. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. For 23 votes, against 43, abstentions 12. We will therefore now debate the substantive motion. Can those people wishing to debate please press their console? Okay, thank you. Okay, are we good? Okay, thank you very much. I have Councillor Berry wishing to speak.
Sorry, Chair, I pressed it a bit too early, almost anticipating what you're going to say, and here I am. Listen, I'm glad we've got that done with now, so we can move on sensibly. It's really interesting to think that this particular local plan that we're putting forward is likely to have, or be informed by, 5 refreshes of each, what's it called? What's that one? Oh, the next one down. What sort of plans? Thank you, neighbourhood plan. I confuse my neighbourhood plans and my local plans. They all seem the same to me, but they're not. So there's going to be 5 refreshers of a neighbourhood plan, which will inform the local plan going forwards between now and 2038, which is interesting. I think the other thing is, and what was hugely positive from my perspective, is that the leader and Councillor Bottrell said that they will be encouraging neighbourhood plans for small villages as well as large villages, which I think is also very positive. Let's hope that they have the will to go ahead and produce them. And let's hope also within the policy itself that we can put in a little bit of a reference, Councillor Bottrell, to the fact that the housing needs will be referenced by the neighbourhood plan. Because it doesn't say it. Neighbourhood plan's mentioned in one of the 1 or 2, but not in all. And really, we should be talking about the neighbourhood plan as being an informative to the way in which the policy will be referenced, if that makes sense. So it'd be very kind of you to put that in and actually make it look as though we are much more understanding of people bringing forward neighbourhood plans that will make a difference to the plan going forwards. So thanks for sorting that out, everybody. I'm glad we're now going to be catching the boat that we are well behind, because the hole is at least currently patched. And let's hope that what Perry said isn't the case, and the thing comes forward and we can all wallow in the success of having a over 4-year land supply, actually, so not really a 5-year land supply. So well done, everybody, and let's look to the future.
Councillor McLennan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to put an amendment, please.
Can I, before you do, I wish, if you're going to bring an amendment, I would like it, according to Constitution Part 4, 20.2, I'd like it in writing, and I wish to adjourn the meeting while you present it in writing. Thank you.
Okay. So, you want me to tell you what the
No, I wish it to be presented in writing. Thank you. We will adjourn the meeting while this happens.
I've got a pen.
We have adjourned temporarily while this amendment is brought forward so we can look at it with the legal team. We don't anticipate it to be very long, so please do not leave the chamber. Two amendments in writing. I'll ask Mr. Holmes to reply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor McLennan. If members would just bear with me for a moment, I'll just explain. Councillor McLennan puts forward two amendments to the motion that's on the screen. He goes to page 158 of your papers, and he seeks to change it's paragraph 27, which refers to infill in the built-up area. It's in the context of parishes and small villages. And he purports to remove the words "will no longer be" in the paragraph or sentence, which will no longer be restricted to 1 or 2 homes. So that's his first amendment. I'll deal with both amendments in the round because it's for the same reasons, Mr. Chairman, that I'll be advising you that they are not valid amendments. The second amendment that Councillor McLennan puts forward is to remove policy 50 and all references to Church Road, Laverstock. And those members that came to Cabinet will remember Councillor McLennan making his case around that site in his ward and in the village that he lives in. Chairman, through you, members have considered Reg 18 and that amendment failed, and we are now therefore considering this motion, which is about Regulation 19, as I've explained to members, starts to touch on a higher plane of soundness and legal compliance. I can assure members that we have followed to the letter all of the rules around preparing a local plan review, and therefore it's for members really to consider the issue today of soundness en route to another consultation and also en route to a planning inquiry, a public inquiry. What Councillor McLennan has not done, and it's the reason why I suggest to you, Mr. Chairman, that his motion should not be accepted, is provide any evidence to support the two amendments that he suggests. He represents his local area, and he's entitled, of course, to bring forward the concerns of that local area in the way that he did at Cabinet and today. But to my mind, given that we are about to progress this matter by, if members approve it, to submit a significant document to a public inquiry, then we have to consider whether in taking the two amendments and considering them, we would be mitigating against the chances of success. And that's not something I can advise this council to do. And it's for that reason I think it weakens our case to take a site out or even consider taking a site out with no evidential basis for the reasons that Councillor McLennan gave at Cabinet and no doubt would repeat today, and to the same extent amend the reference to infill, again, with no evidence. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm mindful that find a reference to a document I was looking at earlier. I'm mindful that the guidance from the Planning Inspectorate talks about the local planning authority rigorously assessing a plan before it's published under Regulation 19 to ensure, in their view, it's sound and meets all the necessary legal requirements. That is the stage we're coming to. And with that in mind, and bearing in mind, I'm afraid, the lack of evidence, and I do have some sympathy with Councillor McLennan and other members in this regard, but because he does not bring forward any supporting evidence, for those reasons, my advice to you, Mr. Chairman, is that you don't accept those amendments.
Thank you very much. And following Mr. Holmes's advice, legal advice, I do not wish to accept your two amendments on this particular submission. So, Councillor McLennan, would you wish to continue in the debate?
I'm not quite sure what you want me to say, Chairman. Are we talking about the full debate, or are we talking about why I can't have my amendment?
We're talking about the full debate.
Okay, then I'd like to come back later. But I would like to say that the two amendments related to, firstly, the infill of one or two houses in a small village, which if you take that restriction away, means that you allow predatory developers to come in and build, whereas all of the other policy relates to local people determining to meet local needs in perpetuity there. That one phrase, which is not part of the policy, it's part of the supportive evidence, I was trying to change from no longer one or two means infill, because that's the way we all understand infill. I wanted to change it back to infill is one or two. So that's the first amendment. The other one would have gone as a result of that. I think part of the reasoning is we've now gone to Section 19 process, not Section 18. And so already the shutters are coming down, as was warned. Thank you. I'll come back later on the full debate.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind members that we are now debating the substantive motion. So all those wishing to speak to that, can you please press your console? Thank you very much. Councillor Steve Bucknell.
Chair, I'll try and be a little bit quicker than last time. Bearing in mind that it's looking highly likely that this council will pass the motion to promote us through to Regulation 19 consultation, could I ask of the leadership of the council and officers that as part of that consultation process, we do much, much more in terms of consultation with local communities than we have done previously. I would like to see a proper roadshow with an opportunity for members of the public and local councillors to question not only officers but also councillors, cabinet members who are promoting this, to really dig down deeply into the allocations that have been made. You will all know that there have been 3 in particular allocations in Royal Wootton Bassett. Actually not in Royal Wootton Bassett, 2 of them are in Lydia Togo's parish, and those will have a massive impact on both Lydia Togo's but also Royal Wootton Bassett, and they also failed to deliver the infrastructure that an alternative would be. And I think it needs, not just in Wootton Bassett, but across the county, we need people to have the real opportunity to question and dig down deep and get proper answers to some of the questions. So I don't want the consultation that we're about to enter into to be just a checklist thing. It's got to be a proper wholesale consultation. Otherwise, you will not take the public with you.
Councillor Ray.
Sorry. Thank you. My colleagues over here are asking that to keep things short and not repeat everything that's been said, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to draw your attention to Policy 85, if you not had an opportunity to read the document in detail, but that is our sustainable construction and low carbon energy policy, which, given our climate change ambitions, I'm delighted to see that it's brought forward. We've set an ambition for the council and for the county to be carbon neutral by 2030, and this policy will get us a long way in helping to achieve that. So some of the things that are in the policy that you may not have had an opportunity to consider are that development will have to have a significantly reduced heat and power demand through efficient energy design and modern methods of construction, and that any remaining demand will be delivered through on-site energy generation. So I'm delighted to support this policy. I am keen to know the level of confidence that the inspector will also be supporting the policy, and I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Budden.
Chair, thank you. As a matter of guidance, please, I'd like clarity before we vote on this. Bullet number 3 authorises the Director of Planning in consultation with others, to make any necessary minor changes. Can you please, or could one of you please clarify for me what you mean by minor changes?
Councillor Wayman.
Thank you, Chairman. Policy 92, conserving and enhancing dark skies. I'm really pleased to see this proposed policy recognising the intrinsic quality of dark skies in the International Dark Sky Reserve and AONBs. So hopefully now my fellow members of the Southern Area Planning Committee now appreciate my regular references to dark skies. Sven. I am, however, a little bit more concerned about the potential conflicts between Policy 86 on renewable energy and Policy 91 on conserving and enhancing Wiltshire's landscapes. Policy 91 is very good on the measures to conserve and enhance Wiltshire's landscape until the final sentence, which says, other than in exceptional circumstances, where it can be evident such development is of overriding public interest to the locality concerned and not possibly met in less sensitive locations, major development will not be permitted within an AONB or national park. Given the emphasis on renewable energy in Policy 86, what is the definition of an overriding public interest? I sort of curtailed a lot of what I was going to say because it went on for rather a long time. But national planning guidance says it is for local authorities to develop a strategy to deliver renewables where environmental impacts are acceptable. Where this is not done adequately, AONBs may be at risk from inappropriate developments, and time and effort can be wasted in conflict. Planning for renewable energy means defining potential and what makes an area suitable and what potential harm is acceptable, underpinned by solid landscape sensitivity assessments. Have AONB teams and partnerships been asked to contribute to proactive policy and guidance? It would seem not to me, as the policy merely states that the size, location and design of renewable energy schemes should, only should, be informed by a landscape and visual impact assessment to minimise any potential adverse impacts. So this is just Wiltshire Council being reactive, not proactive, as it's leaving the landscape and visual impact assessments to the developer. Nor should it just hinge on the landscape and visual impact assessment. AONBs are in the forefront of nature recovery and enhancing biodiversity, particularly farmland bird recovery and other rare species, all of which could be adversely impacted by large-scale standalone schemes. So I find the final comment in the policy preamble particularly worrying. It says, however, in all cases, it must be recognised that the provision of renewable energy at scale will support reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So it seems to me it's just saying tough luck, protected landscapes. The provision of large-scale renewable energy trumps any conservation or enhancement of Wiltshire landscapes. I will, of course, be responding to the consultation accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vigar.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Ray said just now about the low carbon policy number 85. We debated this a few times. I remember when I first got elected to the council in 2021, and there was a debate over whether such zero carbon in operation policy could be introduced for new homes. I think at that time there was quite a conversation about whether it would be it would be get through the examiner. Other authorities were trying it. We now hear that with the exemplars of, for example, Baines in Cornwall, we decided to have the confidence to go ahead. So I think having stood up to call for it, it's only right that I stand up now to say I think it's wonderful that we've done that. It's a very good thing to have in this local plan, and I think we've got a really good consensus on it. The Climate Emergency Working Group has been calling for it, and I think we will all be very happy to see it there. Also very pleased to see the measures on biodiversity. One little point I would just make there is it's great to see an idea for a North Trowbridge Country Park as what's called a SANG, a Sustainable Alternative Natural Green Space Area. Quite a few planning applications often have biodiversity net gain as one of the things that's needed. And if it can't be delivered on site, then it's often said to be delivered off-site with some money paid for compensation. I think it's really important we do actually create those sites rather than just putting money aside for them. So that's why it's good to see an actual site on the ground in the plan, and it would be good to see some more of those coming forward. But generally, I just wanted to say I am really pleased, and as I think many members are, to see that policy 85 in place with the low carbon standards.
Councillor Carbin.
'77 rural exception sites. Now, under the old system, we had a proposal in one of my villages came forward a couple of years back for 12 affordable homes on the rural exception sites, and of course it came up against the old policy which says, no, mate, sorry, you can't have 12, you can only have 10, which means that 2 local families didn't get an affordable home in that village. Now, I'm pleased to see that it's gone up to 20, but you could still have the same situation in a larger village of something coming forward from maybe 22, 23 and coming up against that policy. There's enough background in the policy to prevent any overloading of communities. So what I'm suggesting is maybe just as a minor amendment, you could take out that 20, you'd still have a good policy, but you wouldn't get this nasty bureaucratic barrier, which in this case, to say, stopped a couple of families having a good home. Overall, I'm very impressed with what we have here, the document as a whole. I think it's excellent, and if it can get rid of this atrocity which has caused so much violation in so many of our communities of the 5-year land supply over the last few years, then let's go for it.
Councillor Alison Bucknell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Following on the affordable housing side of things, I think it's really important that this local plan is bringing forward increased numbers of affordable houses. In our manifesto in 2021, we wanted to ensure that the planning policy means affordable housing is not just built in our towns, but also in our villages. Families are often desperate to stay where they grew up, but are unable to find housing they can afford. We will continue to prioritise a local connection in the letting of affordable housing, because that's what was in our manifesto. So we have brought forward through this local plan a greater proportion of affordable housing. Now it's 40% across the board. As somebody who sat on a housing association board for over 15 years, and I see Ross is nodding at me, it's been incredibly difficult to bring forward really high quality housing that people are proud of and want to stay in and support for a long time. So I think the policy that we're putting forward here with 40% affordable housing and with a suggested tenure of 65% for affordable housing for rent, 10% for shared ownership and 25% for first homes, I think is a really good move in the right direction. I'm also pleased to see in Policy 78 that we're giving additional priority and recognition to the need for housing for people of a certain age, i.e. older people, which I'm getting there myself, and also there are more vulnerable people in society. So I welcome that. I know there's a lot that people are not happy about with this local plan, but on the affordable housing side, I think we hopefully have got some good support on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cape.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of points. There's a lot to be commended in this, as I've previously said. I'm just going to note the reduction in numbers for Chippenham to around a third of what was put forward for the HIF bid. I will say no more, it's too parochial. My question is going to be, I wonder if Councillor Botterill could explain, following on from what we heard from Councillor Bucknell earlier, what form this consultation will take going forward and its timing. We heard earlier about the difficulties of potentially doing it through the summer holidays, and I would certainly welcome knowing to what level we're going to get some meaningful consultation with our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Having no further councillors wishing to talk to this debate, I ask Councillor Botterill if he has any comments before we move to the vote.
Could have just sat down, couldn't I? I think it's just really good to hear some of the positive aspects, and particularly coming from the opposition. It's always good to see that some aspects of this are supported. Many aspects, I'd say, are supported. Minor changes. I would expect that these are changes which by their very nature don't change the meaning of something, but are corrections or make the text easier to read or understand. So-called de minimis amendments, as the lawyers would say. In terms of Councillor Berry raised the point about neighbourhood planning being referenced and engagement with the neighbourhood plans. Well, I agree with you, Chuck, in sentiment. But of course, neighbourhood plans aren't strategic is one problem. And also not all neighbourhood plans are as good as others and groups as good as others. And some of them are a bit fuzzy and, you know, so I agree with the sentiment that you're saying, and we will try and build that into our thinking going forward, because clearly neighbourhood planning is a very important side of what we do. Councillor Cape, the consultation, I think we've already said that this would not start until September and after the schools have gone back. So just make that clear again. I think what we need to do is make sure that we get the most out of the consultation that we can. The council is as proactive in terms of giving guidance on how to do the consultation, that we're as outward focused and helpful as we possibly can. And I think, you know, I pick up that sentiment from this meeting that the Reg 19 consultation does need to go the final mile and be as good as it possibly can be. Bearing in mind, you know, we've heard an awful lot of things said today. This has been a prolonged process. It started in 2017. We had a Reg 18 consultation. There was then engagement with parishes and neighbourhood plan groups, road shows. I attended one in Caen. I think there were 2 series of those in 2018. In 2021, the last Reg 18 consultation took place. So that's not that long back in terms of local plan timetables, 2021. Now, could it all have been better? Could we have got better engagement? Yeah, I guess we could. I guess we could. And yeah, excuses over COVID, I agree. But you can always do things better. And I think a measure of a strong and purposeful department is that it takes on board each of these steps what things it could do better. And that's certainly the message that I will be taking back and, has been expressed today. We all know what the consequences would have been of not going forward. We've gone through all of that. So obviously, I'm putting it to full council now. Please endorse this series of steps, proposals which are on the screens now. This really is the best approach that we can do, and it is putting our residents first and making sure that this council, this authority, is best placed to be able to have plan-led development that is successful and optimizes our advantages. Okay.
Thank you very much. In accordance with the Constitution, there will be a recorded vote on this item. Please indicate on your microphone console whether you are voting for the motion, against the motion, or if you're abstaining from the motion. I will allow 20 seconds for members to vote. For 58, against 4, abstentions 13. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. We move on. Notice of motion, no notice of motion have been received for this meeting. I'll do it later. Item 11, announcements from the Cabinet and committees. Are there any Cabinet members or chairs of committees who would like to make any announcements? I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you very much. Then we move on to item 12, membership of committees and S85 requests. As chairman, I will speak first to this item. A report is listed at pages 509 to 512 of your summons. This details that the council has received a request from Councillor Charles McGrath for an extension to the 6-month rule of non-attendance for medical reasons. I will therefore move that the request be granted under S85 of the Local Government Act 1972.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. As part of this item, I will also ask group leaders if they have any changes to committee membership that they wish council to approve or other comments they wish to make. Councillor Clure.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, very quickly with regard to Councillor McGrath, as the Chamber will be aware, he is receiving treatment for leukemia. He's been in and out of hospital. He was out for a while. He's regrettably had to go back in for treatment, which is why we're requesting this be put through. He's attended area board meetings and other meetings in that time and is doing a very good job of being a councillor, despite the fact he's not able to actually get to meetings. So I just think that's worth pointing out. I've given Kieran my committee amendments. Albuquerque off audit, Howard Greenman onto audit, Laura Mays onto Eastern Planning as a sub, Bridget Wayman onto Western Planning as a sub, Tamara Ray onto Eastern, Western and Strategic Planning as sub.
Thank you very much, and we wish the councillor all the very best in a swift recovery. Councillor King.
So I believe Kieran's got the majority of the changes. The only difference between he and I is that Trevor Carbon will remain a substitute on Southern Area Planning Committee, with Carbon off, Budden on, Carbon remain as a substitute. All other changes remain the same, except for, beg your pardon, on Northern Area Committee, Adrian Foster will be a substitute.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rogers, have you got any changes? No. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I will incorporate these within my motion. I will also include a ratification of the new member of the Local Pensions Board, George Simmons, as required by Protocol 2 of the Constitution.
I'd like to second that and confirm the acceptance.
Thank you. I will now open the item to general debate. Any member wishing to speak, please raise your hand to be called. No hands to be seen. That concludes debate. It said, as moved with the original motion, I have no further comments. You'll be very pleased to hear. All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. Please indicate. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Apologies. It is getting late. 13. Questions from members of the council. 2 questions were received by the deadline in order to receive a verbal response or were otherwise accepted. Those questions and their responses are contained in the agenda supplement. I remind members there is no debate on questions, and we start with Councillor Dr. Mark McClelland. You received a written response. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I would like to thank the leader of the council for his reply to my question. That's much appreciated, and I'm not going to rehearse the argument we had this morning over City Hall, but it is truly staggering that Councillor Sample and his colleagues they don't just think that an unsafe building should be open to the public immediately, they're actively leading a campaign with the public to do so. So does the leader agree with me that the irresponsible and cavalier attitude to public safety, the insurance policies and public liability position of this authority shows that Wiltshire's Liberal Democrats are not fit to run this authority?
Well, thank you, Chairman. Goodness. I think it demonstrates that certainly one of them in this chamber would be making a grave mistake were we to, or we'd be making a grave mistake were we to listen to his demand to reopen a building that we have very clear evidence from officers, from surveyors, saying we cannot open as a live entertainment venue because of the risk of acoustic shock to literally make the ceiling fall down. Once that is fixed, yes, it can be opened. But if you opened it right now, you couldn't run live music in there, and because you'd opened it, you couldn't fix it. So it's an absurdity, yes.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to come back, Chair?
We have, no,
well,
we don't.
I've been named personally.
No, please.
Well,
no,
it depends
sorry.
what you're...
No. We have Councillor Richard, sorry.
What the word now means.
No debate, sorry.
It means shortly.
Councillor Richard Budden, thank you very much. Would you like to ask a supplementary?
Chair, has the councillor read the...
Can you please desist?
There are no debate on questions.
Thank you. It is very straightforward. Could you please, please. This whole meeting, I feel, has been carried in exceptionally good company and in great spirit. I do not wish, at the end of the day, to leave this chamber feeling any other things than that we've done a good job. So thank you very much. You cannot have a response. I will move over to Councillor Budden. Do you have a written, you had a written response. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, I won't go over the discussion that we already had this morning. The question concerned the funding of LH Figs, and I was glad to hear the assurance in the answer, that the written answer, that road safety is a priority for the council. I also noticed that there was no argument with my contention that the capital sums available for area boards has not risen in 5 years, and that the funding for highways maintenance for LH Figs had not risen this year. So my question is very simply that if you say that safety is a priority, which you acknowledge, would you also acknowledge the need to see next year's LH Fig budgets increase to bring them back in line with inflation?
Thank you. Councillor Bottrell.
Well, I return to the answer to the question. So in April 22, the budget went up from 250,000 to 500,000. And the substantive schemes pot went up from 150 to 250,000. I think if you spread that over quite a number of years, you'd say that that's actually quite a sizable 100% increase in 1 year. Okay, it diminishes somewhat slightly as we go through subsequent years, but it's still sizable. And yes, of course, everything's up for consideration. And we look at the state of the roads and what this has meant, you know, what sort of schemes this is meant to help out with. But, you know, it has had substantial increased resources during our term. And that is a fact. And it is new money. It's gone up from 250 to 500,000.
Sorry, can we not have a conversation? Thank you very much. You've asked the question. You've asked the question. We are having a response. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have one final question, and that is from Councillor Clark, a question on behalf of Sonia Kaluska.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. This goes back to item 10, I'm afraid. It's for Councillor Bottrell. It's to do with, they say, the question that Ms Cadestra asked about the whether Hilton was going to lose its neighbourhood plan, assessment boundaries. Thank you for this reply, even though you have carefully avoided answering my question. The public will draw their own conclusion from this. You say that for accuracy, you are intending to amend the policy title Land North of Trowbridge to Land North of Hilton, Trowbridge. For absolute accuracy, should this not be amended to Land East of Hilperton, as this is the actual location of the proposed allocation? That's a supplementary, Chairman. Thank you.
Look, I know it's a sensitive issue, and a lot of this arises because, of course, the post town for this area is Trowbridge, just as, of course, we have parts of Wiltshire which have the post town Swindon, which also causes, and Hampshire as well, which also causes some disconsent. So look, it has been amended. I agree North of Hilperton is probably incorrect because it clearly isn't North of Hilperton, is it? Yeah, look, I'll take it away, but the word Hilperton will be there, but I think the word Trowbridge will also be there.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for your forbearance while we adjourn the meeting. I have no further or part 2 items. That concludes the business for today. The next meeting will be held on the 17th of October, 2023. Thank you all very much.